married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, very good morning to you. 6 o'clock is the time, 15th of November. This is Breakfast on GB News. Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. How do you solve a problem like Suella? Crisis for the Prime Minister as his former Home Secretary accuses him of betraying the nation and backtracking on a secret deal.
Now, it comes as the government awaits a final judgment from the Supreme Court on its flagship Rwanda plans. Olivia Utley, more from Westminster.
A double headache for Rishi Sunak today as he deals with the fallout from Suella Braverman's excoriating letter and waits on that Supreme Court judgment.
Well, there are significant dilemmas for Keir Starmer too, as he threatens to sack shadow ministers who disobey him on the Israel-Hamas war.
Elsewhere, could there be a seismic fall in inflation today? Figures are expected to drop below 5%, the lowest in 2 years. We'll bring you the latest as it happens.
And the weather picture always changing. Alex Burkle with what's happening.
Good morning. It's a cloudy and wet day across northern parts, drier and brighter in the south before some wet and windy weather arrives tomorrow. I'll have more shortly.
And shortly with more is Paul Coyte.
The and was in harmony. Did you notice that? That was quite lovely. Listen, big news. You won't believe this. VAR has actually been proved correct. How about that? Aaron Ramsdale's dad has stood up for him with the problem with Mikel Arteta, and also football could use a sin bin in the future. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, I'm not against the sin bin.
No, I like it.
Yeah, it could be good. Ooh. Are you without sin, Isabel?
I love a sin bin.
Yes. I think it's a good idea.
I'd spend a lot of time in the bin, I've got to tell you.
Yeah.
I would spend a lot of time in the bin.
But how much time would you spend in the bin? It'd be
I'd probably 80 minutes of the 90, I reckon.
No, what is the idea?
It is 10 minutes. So it's like it's when you get players going up to the referees, a bit of dissent, off you go. 10 minutes. I think it's a great idea. Exactly. That's what they're trying to do like rugby does.
Quite right.
Okay. You can join in any of our discussions. You email us, gbviews@gbnews.com, or you tweet us on @GBNews.
So our top story this morning, it's the morning after an unprecedented backlash from the scorned former Home Secretary, timed to create maximum embarrassment for the Prime Minister. This comes as a ruling on his flagship immigration policy is expected from the Supreme Court later this morning.
Well, in the attack, Suella Braverman claimed the Prime Minister had failed to deliver on every single policy and spoke of their mysterious deal before labelling him weak.
Well, let's speak to Olivia Utley, who joins us from Westminster this morning. I can only imagine that they are reeling inside Downing Street, even though they put out a very curt and short response to this letter. What does this mean, though, for the Conservative Party? Because, once again, it's highly divisive, this.
Highly divisive. I've never seen a resignation letter like it, almost 2 pages, where she launches a blistering attack on pretty much every element of Rishi Sunak's leadership. Now, it was said before Suella Braverman was sacked that there were about 40 or 50 Conservative MPs who were standing very staunchly behind her and who were going to sort of kick up a fuss, throw their toys out of the pram if she were to lose her job. In the few days between that letter coming out and her losing her job, those MPs have stayed mostly under the radar, and people were thinking that they might hold their counsel until after a general election, at which point they would throw their weight behind either Suella Braverman or someone like her on the right wing of the party. After this letter, it looks quite possible that they start kicking up a fuss now. We've already had one letter of no confidence in Rishi Sunak from Andrea Jenkin. Could it be that more follows? As you said in your introduction there, it is a terrible, terrible time for Rishi Sunak. Perhaps the most damning claim of all in that 2-page letter from Suella Braverman is this accusation that she makes that Rishi Sunak had no plan B for if the Rwanda plan fails. Reading between the lines, it sounds as though Suella Braverman thinks that the Rwanda plan will be ruled illegal in the courts, or at least important elements of it will be ruled illegal in the courts. And she says that she has been asking Rishi Sunak for months and months and months what's going to happen if that happens, how are we going to stop the small boats? And he has fobbed her off, essentially. If that Rwanda plan does indeed get ruled illegal today, then essentially the Tories are back to square one with their central commitment of stopping the boats. And I think at that point, we will start to see some real anger on the Tory backbenchers, because those backbenchers know that to win their seats at the next election, they need to keep their promise about the boats. Poll after poll shows that it is the most important issue for a lot of Brits.
Let's take a look at your report, Olivia, because I know you've been looking into the issue of Rwanda deportations.
June 2022, and all eyes were glued to live coverage of a plane sat on the runway at Boscombe Down military base in Wiltshire. The Boeing 767 was scheduled to fly the first group of illegal migrants to Kigali, the capital of Rwanda. But after a few hours, it became clear that the plane and the migrants were going nowhere. Legal challenges, including one from the European Court of Human Rights, meant the small number of passengers on the plane had been whittled down to none at all. It was an embarrassing blow for the then government of Boris Johnson, who dreamt up the scheme to stop channel crossings. And since then, flights have been on hold as legal challenges progress through the courts. But that hasn't dampened government enthusiasm for the policy, with current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak putting the plan at the centre of his Stop the Boats promise.
We will pass new laws to stop small boats, making sure that if you come to this country illegally, you are detained and swiftly removed.
Last December, there was some good news for the government when the High Court ruled that the plan was lawful. However, that decision was overturned 6 months later when appeal court judges decided that Rwanda is not a safe country. But the government has kept pushing. And today's judgment marks the end of this slow legal process, with the Supreme Court having to decide if the government is entitled to determine whether Rwanda is safe for migrants or not. Either way, Rishi Sunak has indicated that if he wins, he'll ignore any migrant appeals and injunctions from the ECHR. All of which mean the next flight might actually leave the runway. And that is when the true test would begin. But if the government loses, the last 3 years will have been for nothing. The small boats will keep coming, and the Rwanda policy will effectively be dead in the water. Olivia Otley, GB News.
So I suppose the big question is, what is Plan B? I mean, Suella Braverman saying there is no Plan B. Is that true?
Well, it seems pretty true, to be honest. The Rwanda plan is the central pillar of the government's Stop the Boats policy. There are rumours that the government is in conversation with other countries, other third countries where these asylum claims could be processed, but of course those claims could run into exactly the same problems as we have seen with Rwanda, and we could expect another year, I think it's been almost now, of legal processes, complaints, etc. So there is no straight answer if the Rwanda plan is ruled illegal today, and I think that if the government does manage to win today, then that Suella Braverman letter will probably be forgotten about quite soon. But if they do lose, and a lot of commentators are now predicting that, then I think she is going to get some momentum going within the Conservative Party, and it could cause real problems for the Prime Minister.
OK, Olivia, thank you.
And you'll be able to keep up to date on that Rwanda Supreme Court ruling. We're going to bring you special coverage throughout the day here on GB News.
We have a little bit of a countdown for you. That judgment expected to be handed down about 9:15, and we will have live coverage on this specific topic rolling from 9:30.
Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer will attempt to put Labour's position on the Israel-Hamas conflict to a vote later today.
This is to try and keep party unity on whether there should be calls for a ceasefire or not.
Starmer has said that he is ready to sack Labour shadow ministers who disobey him. In the studio now, former Labour Minister of State, Dennis McShane. Dennis, talking tough, acting tough, the right move or not?
It starts, as always, with a stunt by the Scottish nationalist, Usa Hampson, who suddenly floats this idea of tabling an amendment to the King's Speech. It's a bit techie, but they're debating the King's Speech at the moment, and he's got a very hard-line resolution on a ceasefire, which is what Hamas wants, what Vladimir Putin wants, and what millions of people also want. Don't get me wrong, there's huge concern.
Agencies in the United Nations.
No, United Nations. And people, we saw the giant demonstration. I saw the fag end of it. It was big, it was peaceful, it was lots of families there. So Keir Starmer is saying, look, don't touch this SNP stunt with a barge pole. Labour will table its own motion, and we will invite all colleagues, to use that term, MPs, to vote for it. And it's just like when you're in government, when you've got a big problem in opposition. Mr Sunak hopes that all Tory MPs will support him, and Mr Starmer hopes that Sir Keir hopes that all Labour MPs will support him.
Well, more than hopes. I mean, he's almost threatening them, isn't he? I believe there's a number of ministers that are on sack watch, up to 11, and frontbenchers have been told they will be sacked if they don't support him.
You're automatically sacked if you break a major three-line whip, and this is a three-line whip. It was Keir Starmer who first came out with the idea of humanitarian pauses. That's adopted by Joe Biden, it's adopted by the European Union, it's adopted by the G7. And if you want to form a government to say, I know I'm going to go right against what all of the other Western democracies are saying and doing, it doesn't sound sort of very, very sensible. So
it's semantics. A lot of it's semantics. I mean, humanitarian pauses, which are basically small ceasefires.
Exactly. I completely agree with you. I mean, President Macron made a mini-stir last Friday, I think, when the BBC's Europe editor, Katja Adler, interviewed him in an excellent English, it must be said. He said, let's have a ceasefire. And I went, wow. And then he said, to allow evacuation of women and children. So that's a humanitarian pause by another name. He then went on to say Hamas must be eliminated. Now, I think many of us would think that the Israeli army, a bit like the British army when it had to face IRA terrorism, you know, they didn't say they took hits, but they really minimised civilian casualties. And I'm afraid the the Israeli army throughout history only knows one button, which is steamroller in, and if anybody's in the way, men, women, children, innocent people, they're out.
And we understand that operations have been happening overnight on a particular hospital that has been the focus of lots of attention in Gaza to try and eliminate a number of Hamas members who are said to be hiding in there. And all of this comes as we had this sort of strengthening of language from both sides in the House yesterday. Andrew Mitchell and David Lammy, both going further than they have previously in their criticism of Israel.
You can sense this building up. I mean, I sensed it just as a real veteran of demos on Saturday. I wasn't taking part, actually. I was just coming back from GBNews as it happened. But where I live, 82 right-wing hooligans, you could call them the Braverman boyos, had been arrested in Pimlico for just causing a disturbance, trying to beat up people. You saw some scenes at stations which were horrible.
Did you actually see this?
No, I didn't. No, it happened before, just going on a Metropolitan Police report. And I just found... what worried me was that there were a lot of families and young children there, and fine, by all means show your horror at the deaths now of innocent people in Gaza, but are we building up now a community of people who will not accept the right of Israel to exist and are just pushing into the background? Because in the SNP motion, I read it, again, this is techie stuff, no reference to the Jew-killing spree 6 weeks ago that started all this. And I think that's utterly shameful that, of course, it's, you know, it refers to terrorist attacks, atrocities. No SNP. This was about targeting Jews in bed, old people, babies, and the rest. And I'm not prepared to simply say, oh, well, that's just another episode in the very troubled history of Israel.
So how would you vote if you got a vote today, and how do you think the vote will go?
I'm a fairly boring loyalist, you know. I along with David Cameron and Boris Johnson, dare I admit it, I voted, and 413 MPs, I voted for the intervention in Iraq. I thought removing Saddam Hussein, who'd gassed people, who'd tortured people, would be a good thing. I now think that was a mistake. It was better to leave an ugly dictator in place than to destabilise the region. And then David Cameron himself then went and intervenes or supports intervention in Syria and Libya, opening the floodgates of hell to mass immigration. Thank you, David Cameron.
OK. How would you handle a problem like Suella?
Well, I'm tempted to say that I'm very glad Suella Braverman agreed to my suggestion yesterday, and my words, to send her letter. You've heard me, or your colleagues have heard me on GBNews, and thank goodness you're here to allow me to criticise this government, saying she was an absolute disaster and Sunak is one of the weakest prime ministers we've ever had. She's utterly right in her criticism of Sunak, Mr. Sunak. She doesn't seem to be extending it back to Boris Johnson from much of this. He's the Fonz at Origo. He's the beginning of all of this. I think it's a great gift to the Labour Party. I really wish her all the best.
OK. Dennis McShane, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
It's bang on 6:15 and you are tuned in to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel. And here's a reminder of our top stories.
How do you solve a problem like Suella? Crisis for the Prime Minister, as his former Home Secretary accuses him of betraying the country and backtracking on a secret deal between them.
It comes as the government awaits a final judgment from the Supreme Court on their flagship Rwanda plans.
There are significant dilemmas for Sir Keir Starmer as he threatens to sack shadow ministers who disobey him on the Israel-Hamas war.
Elsewhere, could there be a seismic fall in inflation today? Figures are expected to drop below 5% for the first time in 2 years. We'll bring you the very latest as it happens.
We're now talking about drug use and misuse, and the number of drug-related deaths in Northern Ireland has trebled in 10 years.
Yes, this is according to a report from Queen's University in Belfast, who've said that the number of drug misuse deaths have risen from 61 in 2011 to 175 in 2021.
So you put that together and it means that Northern Ireland has the second highest rate of drug-related deaths in the UK. That's after Scotland.
Well, joining us now to tell us more about it is psychiatrist and expert on addictions, Dr. Niall Campbell. Good morning to you. What would be behind? Everyone. Good morning. What would be behind such a significant rise over the last decade, do you think?
Well, I think that drug deaths in the UK, all over the UK and the world, are going up, and Northern Ireland's catching up. Why should they miss out, as it were? We're seeing the biggest number of deaths in the UK and Northern Ireland is from opiates, which of course are very toxic, but increasingly popular, cocaine, more ketamine, with alcohol. I had a young man in the Priory recently from Northern Ireland, and a rural town. There's only a few pubs there, and he said you can get cocaine in 5 or 10 minutes. It's astonishing. And he's on 2 or 3 grams of cocaine at night, and he's drinking, I'm not joking, 10 or 12 pints of Guinness. So off we go, you can just drink more.
But the question, Niall, is why? And you mentioned a rural town there. So we're not talking about Derry, we're not talking about Belfast here. We're talking about Auchnacloy, we're talking about Enniskillen or whatever it is. Why?
Yes. Well, it's fashionable. It's popular. The other funny thing that's popular in Northern Ireland is a thing called pregabalin, which is an anti-epileptic drug, which is a bit like Valium. People, the kids take handfuls of it. They can sort of steal it from the cupboard at home. There's a bit more disposable money, weirdly, but the consequences to the physical health of the young people, to their mental health, they're getting more depressed, they're more paranoid, relationships with others, their relationships with the drugs, and of course work and money. Yeah. These things are not cheap, and they're funding the kind of people that supply it, who are not very pleasant.
Niall, when you're talking about drugs, and this would be enough to put me off, but you talk about that ketamine, and then that is always connected to the term a horse drug. You know, it's a sedative for horses or whatever it is. You see, I would look at that and I would think, oh, no. Why is there attraction? Why do people not seem repulsed by ketamine?
Well, it's got this reputation. I can't remember who first said that. Horse tranquilizer. It's a mammalian anaesthetic drug, which is also used in humans. Not particularly popular anymore with anaesthetists, but it can be a great anaesthetic drug in an emergency and certain procedures. You can't have a general anaesthetic. So it's a downer. So if you see them staggering about in the streets, falling all over the place, they're probably on drinking ketamine. If they're picking off the walls, chatting rubbish, they're on coke and alcohol. And of course, sometimes they mix it. It's the great crack to go out for the evening, and you have a few tufts on a tokes and a spliff, and then you have a bit of ket and a bit of coke, a few bumps of coke and a few drinks, and that their brains are completely fried. Yeah. And they're falling about all over the place. You know, usually they're too stoned to fight, but it's a catastrophe. It's an epidemic, and we are in Northern Ireland. We're catching up.
And our ability in Northern Ireland to cope with drug abuse is poor. The funding is poor. There's no government in place, as you know as well. I have seen clinics, I've been to clinics whereby people lie in corridors, and this is left to the voluntary sector to deal with. And there's just a line of people outside who are addicted, who are overdosed, and there's nothing pretty about it. There is this whole thing about it's a social thing for the middle classes on a Saturday night or whatever, and then there is a whole other plague there as well.
Well, yes, so it's no longer just up the Malone Road. For listeners in the mainland, that's the equivalent of Knightsbridge. That's where cocaine used to be, but it's everywhere. So why shouldn't they have it in Knocknacloy, Enniskillen and Ballymena? Not fair. We should have a bit as well. And the problem continues. Opiates used to be the main issue back in the 80s in various towns, including my hometown, Ballymena, but that's still a big thing. Tends to be you're either opiate user or cocaine and ketamine user. But and as you say, the government provision is poor, but AA, NA, CA is free, it's online, help is available if people want it.
Just a final...
And most people who get clean use the fellowship meetings.
Yeah, just a final thing, Niall, about opiates. You know, I've had terrible back problems over the past couple of years, and I've found that opiates work quite well in terms of pain relief. But getting a doctor to prescribe me an opiate is nigh on impossible. Where the heck do they get opiates from?
Well, chemists and wholesale chemists are quite leaky. If you can pay for it, you can get anything. So if you want tramadol, if you want oxycodone, you can get them. And of course, if you want heroin, you can get it off a guy. He might be wearing a balaclava, or his boss is wearing a balaclava, but you can get it. And there's plenty of street drugs come into Ireland via the ports. It's a big entry point all over Ireland. For drugs, particularly cocaine, from South America.
Well, Niall, it's an eye-opener, a depressing eye-opener. Thank you very much indeed.
But help is available if people really want it, Eamonn.
Yeah, that's worth stressing. Narcotics Anonymous, I think you were saying, the NA.
It's AA, Cocaine Anonymous. It's online, it's available, it's free.
Fantastic.
Good talking to you, Dr. Niall Campbell, who's a psychiatrist and an expert on addiction. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay tuned away. I believe it's going to be a beautiful autumnal day, but things are going to get a bit spicy over the next 24 hours. Alex Burkill has all the details.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather update. Ahead of some wet and windy weather arriving tomorrow, we have a bit of a north-south split in our forecast at the moment. That's because it's a cloudy picture across many northern areas with outbreaks of rain, some of these heavy in places. Further south, though, a drier, sunnier picture, particularly across southern England and Wales and also Northern Ireland. Watch out for a few showers across parts of Wales and southwest England, perhaps. Also, a decent amount of sunshine across the far north of Scotland today. Temperatures a little bit on the low side, ranging from 8 or 9 Celsius in the north to around 12 or 13 Celsius further south. As we go through this evening and overnight, we're going to see a bit more cloud and some further outbreaks of rain for a time across northern parts, but most of the rain clearing away. Some clearer skies towards the south, but then our attention turns to this swathe of wet and windy weather pushing its way up from the southwest. This will lift our temperatures, so a relatively mild start in the southwest, chillier further north and east, some frost likely across parts of Scotland. So a reversal in our fortunes as we go through Thursday. Across many northern parts, it's looking largely dry and there'll be some bright sunny weather around, but a wet and windy day ahead across more southern areas. The rain will be heavy at times, some gales likely, so we could see some disruption to travel and other impacts as well. Temperatures, well, they're going to be relatively academic because of the unsettled weather in the south and a little bit on the cool side further north.
Discussing sin bins next, not for Eamonn, but in football. I would quite like a sin bin for you sometimes. Send you off for 10 minutes. We'll be discussing that.
I'd like to go off for 10 minutes.
With Paul Coyte. Stay tuned away for that.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
As the time approaches 6:30, let's have a look at some of the other stories you're waking up to on this Wednesday morning.
Israel says its military is carrying out an operation against Hamas in Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. This is the first time the military is directly entering the hospital after days of strikes and heavy fighting. Israel have consistently argued that the hospital is being used by Hamas as a base, which the terrorist organisation have denied.
Hundreds of people living in a tower block in Bristol have been told to leave their homes immediately after major structural faults were discovered. Bristol City Council declared a major incident after building surveys showed Barton House would be unsafe in the event of a fire or explosion.
The council said the residents were told to pack enough clothes for a day or two and to stay with family and friends if possible.
The chief executive of the NHS, Amanda Pritchard, has pledged to wipe out all cervical cancer cases in England by 2040. There is now a drive to boost the uptake of both cervical screening and the HPV vaccine. Cervical cancer affects 3,200 women, killing 850 every year in Britain.
Well, it's time to go through all the latest sports news. Paul Coit is here in the studio. Good morning.
Good morning. We have a little officiating thing. There's quite a few officiating bits and pieces. Firstly, VAR was proved to be correct. There was the goal that Arsenal against Newcastle, which happened a couple of weeks ago. Mikel Arteta was absolutely up in arms, saying that everything was a joke and it was embarrassing and the terrible decisions. And then Arsenal put a statement out the next day saying that the officiating's not good enough. Well, anyway, they do this Match Officials Mic'd Up TV show, which happens every couple of weeks. And Howard Webb, who's the chief of referees, goes through the decisions, and they'll play the audio between VAR and the referees and the on-pitch officials. So anyway, they went through the whole thing, and I've got to say, from what I saw, everything was done extremely well, and the pressure that these officials are under to go, right, OK, now we've got to check this. There were 4 different things they had to check with the goal. There was the fact that the ball looked like it had gone over the line, firstly, and they're saying, you know, it should have been a corner. No. OK, so they look at that. Then they looked at an offside. Then they looked at a foul. Everything all happened at the same time. So Arsenal was so angry about the whole thing, and they looked at it and went, right, no, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. let's give the goal. And I thought it was really impressive the way they did it.
The way of what some people see has ruined the game.
Totally.
But actually, sometimes it can save it.
I agree, absolutely.
I think the big problem is panic and speed.
Yes.
You know, everybody wants an immediate decision.
That's right.
From VAR. I just want to say to people, shut your mouths.
Yeah.
Just while we listen and watch this, and just make sure.
They did it well because they're sitting in Stockley Park, and you can see the whole process. You could see running it back, go forward. OK, we're happy with that, and they're saying to the referee, right, we're happy with that one. He's the one that you've got to feel sorry for, because you can see all the players around the outside, and he's going, OK, fine.
It's not a job I'd ever want to do.
The pressure would be unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And
so anyway,
respect to anybody who carries out officialdom in whatever sport.
I agree.
It is.
I agree.
Sin bins. We were talking about them there. The International Football Association Board is considering 10-minute sin bins.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's a really good idea. We look at rugby, and you've said this so many times, haven't you, Izzy, about the fact that the way that players react to officials in rugby, it's with respect. They call them sir. It's only the captain that is allowed to speak to the referee, whereas in football, we know what happens. Everybody piles in, and nothing seems to be done about it. So it's now time. So IFAB, as you mentioned, they're going to meet in a couple of weeks, who are the lawmakers of the game, and discuss it, because there's more problems that goes down to grassroots players and grassroots referees. Nobody wants to be a referee because of the trouble they're going to get into. You know, you get players that are surrounding them. Sometimes they get hit. Sometimes there's violence. They need more respect.
Well, if you look at the game of rugby, I just think of the Rugby World Cup final a couple of weeks ago. It was a British referee from Gloucestershire. He was absolutely brilliant.
Nigel Owens,
he had a lot of really high-pressure moments where they used VAR, and the pressure on him for a quick response and reaction with the support of VAR, and he came out, I think, you know, who would want to do that? I actually looked at him and thought, wow, I really admired him. So if it can then transfer into football, from my point of view, it seems like a good idea.
It could be stamped out so easily, either with yellow cards or red cards. But if the sin bin is it, right, OK, that's it, you're going to be off for 10 minutes. You don't want to get involved in that. So, should behave.
Talking about being stamped out, Arsenal have a goalkeeper called Aaron Ramsdale.
Yes.
Who's been stamped out from the first place. And that's gone to this guy, Rhea, who's taken his place. Fine. That is the competition that these players face and the pressure that they face. And as a result, Ramsdale won't be considered for an England position if he's still on the bench.
That's going to affect him.
So his dad has come up. What's his dad said?
Well, his dad, see, the thing is, I don't know how I would feel if my dad... I mean, you kind of want your parents to defend you, but when he goes out in public and says, you know, my son's being treated badly and it's not fair, because David Raya has come over from Brentford. He's on loan. He's not actually an Arsenal player. So the only chance that Aaron Ramsdale's going to get to play, it seems, is either cup games, already out of the League Cup, but against Brentford, because you can't have Raya play against his parent club. So he'll play in that game. But his dad is just not very happy about it, which is not really a surprise.
His dad sees in his son, a young guy enthusiastic at what he was doing and whatever, and he says that the light has gone out of his eyes.
Yeah, that's it. The smile's gone. But the thing is, he didn't do anything essentially wrong, and David Raya hasn't been that great either. So, his dad's standing up for him. I think his mum's going to get involved soon and go over and give Mikel Arteta a good telling off.
Yes,
I think it's probably what he needs. I'd like a quiet word with you, mister.
OK. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. See you again at 7:20.
Right, can you guess what the ugliest town in England is? I feel guilty because I instantly think of one, but I'm not going to say it.
I know what you're thinking. I know.
Tell us what you think at home, and we'll reveal all in headline.
It's a dangerous sport to play.
It is a dangerous sport to play, which is why I'm not going to say it publicly. All right, see you in a moment.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Let's go through the newspapers now. Joining us to go through some of the stories making the headlines today, writer and broadcaster Candice Holdsworth, and TV personality and author and all-round good chap Christopher Biggins.
But we start this segment by taking a look at the front pages, and as you might expect, just one particular face on most of them. There she is, the Times leading with Suella Braverman calling the Prime Minister a traitor.
The Eye also leads with her attack on the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Revenge, the phrase is revenge served cold, but they're saying served hot.
The Daily Mail reporting on the growing Tory civil war. We had a deal and you broke it. She looked a bit dishevelled in that picture.
Well, she's quite coy looking. She's looking, you know, under her hair there. There's quite a few unusual pictures of her today. Daily Express leads with her declaring war on the Conservative leadership. She accuses Rishi of betraying the nation. Same picture used again.
Yeah, and an interesting headline from the Daily Mirror this morning. They're also focusing on Suella's savaging of Sunak, but they say Tories are revolting. Interesting play on words there.
And, OK, so let's go to Candice and Christopher as to what they make of things. So the Suella Braverman situation, Candice, what do you make of this one?
I think it's been coming a while. I mean, there's no way that this was just out of the blue. Everyone said it was her comments on homelessness, but for a while there's been differences. I mean, I don't know if you remember a few weeks ago where she had her comments about multiculturalism not working. Sunak completely said the opposite. So it was clear that they were moving in very, very different directions, and now we can see it's actually cemented. I mean, he's been distancing himself for a few weeks now, and with the appointment of David Cameron, you can see he's sort of pivoting away from that outspoken right wing of the Tory party, and he's moving straight to the centre.
Right, which leaves a problem for him. Clearly, he made a calculation that Suella Braverman on the backbenches was not a problem, but this letter will definitely have stoked support, I suppose you could say, for her. Or will it, is my question? Because by going back on, I suppose, what was not, you know, a gentleman's agreement that she would support Rishi Sunak's bid to be Prime Minister if he gave her free rein as Home Secretary, she's betrayed that secret, which is unprecedented, I believe, in Westminster. Can her allies trust her not to blab in the future?
Well, I don't think they can. I mean, because I think she's been quite outrageous in her statements. And I think anybody in the Conservative Party would be nervous about trusting her in anything. I mean, I'm doing pantomime quite soon in Southampton, and my producers are keen to offer her the Wicked Queen next year. And I think she'll be marvellous.
Yeah, I could see a career in that. We could definitely see that. But the thing is, Biggins, because she makes accusations about the boss man, doesn't make them untrue. It might make them unpalatable to a lot of people. It'd be depending just how many people would say, she's right there, she spoke out. The other thing I don't understand about being a Prime Minister is, if I was Prime Minister, I would be in charge. not the Chancellor of the Exchequer, not the Home Secretary. I would be the boss. End of. Shut your mouth. Listen to me. Do as you're told.
What would you do now? Because, you know, we've seen Conservatives for lesser crimes, you know, having the whip removed and being thrown out of the party. Does he get rid of her altogether, or does that make her a martyr? You know, how does a boss manage someone who quite clearly wants to be the boss themselves?
Well, she goes to the back benches now, and I think the thing is that you give her the oxygen of publicity, which is very, very tempting to say, hold on a minute, I didn't do this, you did that, or whatever. But then that stokes everything. So the idea is just give it a few weeks and she'll be irrelevant, really. And she's now in a position where she has to make herself relevant and keep the argument. I mean, I'm not saying what she said about Rishi Sunak is wrong. A lot of people would like to choose that it's not right. But interesting.
Do you think she becomes irrelevant, Candice, if she's, you know, now on the back benches and said everything she's got to say? Or do you think she's going to make it her business? And seeing as the headline, you know, and the media kind of love her so much because she's so outrageous.
Yes, exactly.
Could she actually be, you know, part of the demise of the party over the next year?
Oh, it's a huge possibility. I mean, they're not behaving like a governing party. They're almost behaving like a party that's just lost the election. I mean, there are so many divisions and they're all taking chunks out of each other. And it's so true that Suella Braverman was clearly positioning herself as the next leader. I mean, she was totally overshadowing Rishi Sunak. And so, you know, I don't think she's going to stop now. The only thing is the positions she takes, they appeal to a certain wing of the Conservative Party, but in terms of the wider electorate, I don't think so. I don't think she has that appeal.
I agree with you. I think she's completely deluded if she thinks she's going to be the next Prime Minister.
Absolutely, because how much of what she's saying is true, we don't know. I mean, you said that. I mean, and I agree with you. I think if you're Prime Minister, you're the boss. You're the kingpin.
But you're not. I mean, the idea that the Chancellor comes to you and says, no, we'll not be doing that, or the Home Secretary said, I'd have a few choice words for them, but it is absolutely ridiculous. And the real power are the Dominic Cummings, the Alistair Campbells of this world, and they decide policy. You'll not say this, you will do this, you will do... I mean, I would be a whole breath of fresh air if I was a politician.
You'd like a presidential system. Because, of course, the Prime Minister's bound by collective responsibility and has to have his cabinet on his team. It is a dilemma. I wonder what conversations have gone on. Because, again, Nadine Dorries in the last few days has been talking about how
she's brilliant,
has a bit of a temper and how he's quite irritable. I mean, he put out a very curt response to this letter saying, I believe in action, not words. But I wonder what words he said behind closed doors.
But I think that's great. And I actually think it's amazing that people go, oh, well, he has a temper, he's a bad person, he should be put in jail for that or whatever. Absolutely brilliant.
Takes one to know.
Well, I'm telling you, what is the falseness?
No, I know.
I mean, you know, Sunak is one of these people who comes out, what I want for the country, and I want what you want, and all this rubbish that they get on with. Why don't you just say, I'm a nasty little man, I've got a lot of temper here, and I'm going to kick somebody in the shins if they annoy me. He would get my vote.
But can you imagine what it must be like in number 10? I mean, everyone wants your job. I mean, a very difficult job.
Why would you ever enter into that?
I know.
I mean, it's only destined. I looked at them all around the cabinet table yesterday, and you thought, in another 6 months or so, how many of you will be disappointed? You'll be thrown to the wolves.
Yes, exactly.
After that.
So they should be.
Could you be a politician, Biggins?
What was that?
Could you be a politician?
Do you know, I like the idea of it, but I think the frustration would make me go demented.
Yeah, and also having to toe a party line.
Absolutely.
So difficult.
I mean, I've said many times on this programme that I don't want a coalition government, but I want a government. I want all of them to come together. These rows are just so depressing.
And I really do think they turn off the public.
They do.
And I think that's why this is a disaster for the Conservative Party, because most people go, a plague on both the houses, whichever faction of the party, you know, they're all doomed.
And then Labour complaining about it. How dare they complain when they've got
I'll just say, my experience of a coalition in Ireland or, you know, what we saw with the Lib Dems and the Conservatives is nothing gets done. So that's a complete waste of time.
No, but I agree with you there. But I'm not saying coalition. I'm saying just get together and let's talk about everything as one. Not politically, but trying to sort the problems out that we have.
Or trying to find things that people have in common rather than focusing on things that we have different, because there has to be more unity as a nation, as a government, as, you know, the way everyone is just so intolerant and divided on everything is so tiresome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a depressing period.
Well, let's cheer ourselves up, Candice, because there is a positive news story out today. Tell us about this in the NHS.
Yeah, so the CEO of the NHS, Amanda Pritchard, she's just launched a new initiative. They want to completely eradicate cervical cancer by 2040, which is just under 20 years from now. And the way they want to do this is they want to increase uptake of the HPV vaccine for under 25s, and also for more women to go for their pap smears. Because according to this article on the front page of The Times, a third of women don't go when they receive their letter for their screening, and it is so important for catching cells that are becoming abnormal. And then you can jump on top of it very quickly, because one of the things about cervical cancer is it doesn't show symptoms early on, so you can get quite advanced before you actually show symptoms. And that would be amazing if we could eradicate this form of cancer.
Absolutely, especially as it affects particularly young people.
Yes, that's one of the things about it.
Do you think they don't go because they know there's a queue and they might not get in, or they're cancelled, or, you know...
It's not a particularly nice procedure. So I think some women prefer to just sort of not think about it and sort of put it off.
You'll tell me later.
I'll tell you later,
Tell me
darling.
later,
but
yes,
it's actually, I would say, worth it. So it would encourage people
And
to
if they conquer one type of cancer, they'll then conquer another type and another type. So this is all interrelated. Let's get an update with the time at 6:45. This is Breakfast on GB News. A reminder of the top stories.
How do you solve a problem like Suella? It's crisis time for the Prime Minister. His former Home Secretary has accused him of betraying the nation and backtracking on their secret deal.
It comes as the government awaits a final judgment from the Supreme Court on its flagship Rwanda plans.
But there are significant dilemmas for Sir Keir Starmer too. He's threatening to sack shadow ministers who disobey him on calls for a ceasefire in Gaza.
There could be a seismic fall in inflation today. Figures are expected to drop below 5%. We'll bring you the latest just after 7 o'clock this morning. OK, so where do we want to go to next with Christopher and Candice here?
Oh, let's talk about the royals, shall we? Because I believe there's been a phone call, Christopher Biggins, between father and son.
Well, I know. I mean, the King reached the grand old age of 75, which is fantastic. I'm 75 in a couple of weeks' time, yes. And I'm very excited. And, of course, he was wonderful. He gave a wonderful businesses a pleasure yesterday by going along and giving food to people who need... And also a £10 tip to the man selling the big issue, which I thought was great. And it confirms that they do actually
carry
money, exactly, for the odd thing. And also there was a phone call from his son Harry, wishing him a happy birthday, which I think is terrific. Anything to bridge that gap that they have in between them, because I think they do love each other enormously, and I think it's a great shame. So I think it was a very good day for him, and he had a party last night with some strange people going to it in the evening. Well, I mean, there was... I can't think of anybody now. but
not you, Biggins.
No, not me. I certainly not me. No. Where is the list of people who went? But it was an interesting party. Not the one that I would have thought would have been riveting at your 75th.
No, but I presume I don't know who was there, but I mean I presume he's compelled to invite a lot of people.
Was this the Highgrove Tea Party?
No, this was a party last night. I think it was.
I'll try and find out and get
charity
back to you.
type people and whatever. But anyway, Biggins, what are we doing for your party then?
Yeah,
are you going to have a
our
party?
invite?
What's going to happen?
Now, I'll be doing 2 performances in Southampton as the man in the mirror
on that night.
In pantomime. So I never always my birthday falls in pantomime season.
Well, the best gig I ever had in the world was as the man in the mirror.
Did you do it?
Yes. But the thing is, they just recorded me, and they just pressed the button for every performance.
And you got paid?
Yes.
Well, that's I've got to
best job ever. Best job ever. You're not. What is the date of your birthday? The actual date?
16th of December.
Oh,
and I'm the 3rd. So that's really
what
good.
What are you?
Me, I'm February.
Oh, sorry, right.
My father's 75 this weekend as well. There must be something in the water.
Well, yes, 1948 was a very good year.
Post-war babies.
Absolutely.
I was just reading he had a private dinner party at Clarence House last night, but he did have a reception earlier on with 400 midwives and nurses, as well as a tea party at Highgrove. Had a really busy day.
Yeah.
The only one who says the king doesn't work hard. I mean, I know it was his birthday, but that sounds like a long list of engagements.
And he is 75.
And he is 75.
And his wife, the Queen, is slightly older.
But you're doing 2 performances. Look at you talking about being 75.
I know.
No rest for the wicked, eh,
I
Biggins?
can't believe I'm 70. I don't know where it goes. It's terrifying.
I can't believe you're 75 either, but then, as I always say, there are no wrinkles on a balloon.
That's very true.
Yes.
No, I agree.
You keep it up.
How do you feel, out of interest? When does that feeling stop? Because I'm still in my head 30, I think.
Yeah.
How old are you in your mind?
No mirrors in your house either?
Huh?
No mirrors in your house?
No.
Mentally, I'm 30.
I feel as though I'm 21. I remember being 21. It was fabulous.
Yeah.
OK. Right, what else have we got here? Research, Candice, claims that Fred and Wilma Flintstone were better than modern parents. Yabba dabba doo.
Yes, this is a very amusing story in the Daily Star. There's a bit of serious research. So adolescent psychiatrist called Dr. Annie Swanepoel has said that our ancient tribal societies were probably better for raising children because it was more communal. So your mum and dad got a bit of a rest and all the other members of the tribe would take over looking after the baby, rather than like the nuclear families we have now, where it's one parent working in at the house and the other at home with the kids, kind of taking all the stress.
Because I want to talk about this film about Napoleon. I saw a trailer for it at the weekend and I thought, my goodness me, that looks impressive. Can you tell us more?
Well, and also today in the papers, nearly every newspaper is a rave review. I mean, they're fantastic. 5 stars, upwards, downwards. I mean, it's just wonderful. And Ridley Scott is a sensational director. And I think everyone gets very excited by whatever he does. And so I think,
he must be a heck of an age as well now, Ridley Scott.
He must be. I think he must be older than me, funnily enough.
And Joaquin Phoenix is incredible. Walk the Line, which you must have loved, all about Johnny Cash. He was just unbelievable.
Joaquin is a superb actor.
Has he got an Oscar, I wonder?
He's brooding as well.
He'll get one for this, I think.
Do you think?
I think this could be the one that wins. If he hasn't got one already, I can't tell you about that. But I just think that it's great, and I think we need films like this to take us back into the cinema, which we've lost going to since COVID. I mean, the cinemas aren't as full. I know that, for instance, Barbie made a huge amount of money, but I think that was unusual. I think people, mainly women, I think, too.
Although to mixed reviews as well. People went, but everyone sort of came out going,
Oh, I loved it.
Did you?
Oh, I adored it. I thought it was wonderful.
Okay, good.
And there was a girl behind me sitting in the cinema who was in floods of tears. And I said, "Are you all right?" She said, "Yes, it was just so wonderful."
Goodness sake, what's wrong with the world? Honestly.
I know.
The thing that I would like about Napoleon would be the educational side of it, as long as it's not made up the way so much of Hollywood today is about retro casting and all this sort of business.
No, I think they told it for truth and real.
So it's about the love story side and there's some battle scenes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Does he ever say, "Not tonight, Josephine"?
I hope not.
We have to end on these towns before we run out of time. If there's something Britain does well, it's towns. We have a lot of them, 1,250 to be precise. But across England, Scotland and Wales, here are the rankings for the prettiest and the ugliest. Before we get them all revealed, what would you say is the UK? You've done a lot of pantos.
I've done a lot of pantos. And
ugliest town in Britain?
Hull.
Oh, OK. Prettiest?
Well, it has to be somewhere in Devon and Cornwall, I think. I think probably St Ives.
Ooh, nice. OK, what about you, Candice?
So prettiest for me is probably Buxton. I love Buxton.
Do you?
My family live up there, and I think it's lovely. All the Georgian... Yes, Derbyshire. The ugliest...
Get mineral water from Buxton.
Yes, that's it. All the Victorians, they love that, sitting in the spas. The ugliest, I feel bad saying this, but probably somewhere like Slough, one of these like 1950s, 60s, where they did all the concrete.
Abominations.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I will say ugliest probably Swindon. I just worked there for a long time. You don't have to go more than 5 minutes out of the town centre and it's beautiful Cotswolds, but it just... It's just a horrible town centre. Prettiest, I'd stay in the Cotswolds, I think. So one of the Cotswolds, you know, pretty little towns, whether it's Burford or something, I don't know. What about you, Eamonn? You're going to put your Kiwi mouth?
I would absolutely not mention that. I made the mistake once of making a joke about a certain town that was written into script for me, and I thought,
forgiven.
Never again.
OK, go for favourite, prettiest. You
No.
can't lose with that.
There's so many people.
Belfast.
But the prettiest would be Rye. They've got listed here. Now, Rye is where? Kent.
Right.
I don't know Rye. I've never been.
It's
lovely.
Coast.
It is very, very nice. I think it's because it's on the coast. It's classified as number one.
Pretty architecture.
Yeah, pretty architecture.
Anything with water, with coast, would be attractive to me, I have to say.
And me. I love the thought of living on the ocean.
Well, you say anywhere with water. I mean, there are a lot of really ugly seaside towns in this country, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, you're right. But I mean, I think you can pick... I think rivers, too, are lovely. Of course, the trouble is, living on a river, you get the risk of being flooded. And that's
so the most beautiful, number one is Rye, number two is a place called Holt.
No, Norfolk.
Where is it?
It's Norfolk,
right.
yeah.
3, Woodbridge. It's funny, we never heard of any of these places.
Ledbury is 4. That's it's on the border of Wales and the UK.
Now, I've heard
anyway,
of
the
Ripon.
ugliest is Slough, and the second ugliest is Merthyr Tydfil in Wales, which actually I have been to, and it's pretty grim. I've been to the courthouse there, so dealing with a reprobate, so I really did see the ugly underbelly of the valleys.
And they've got St David's as well in Pembrokeshire, which is one of the prettiest ones. And Pembrokeshire's actually a hidden gem. I went to a wedding there a few years ago.
Absolutely stunning.
It's gorgeous.
It is beautiful.
And white sand.
Usually you find anywhere that people haven't discovered yet. It's beautiful.
I know. Instagram's ruining that.
Yes.
Send us your prettiest, your ugliest. Let us know your thoughts and get involved in all of the top topics of the day, including what to do with Suella. But in the meantime, here's Alex Burkill with your Wednesday forecast.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather update. Ahead of some wet and windy weather arriving tomorrow, we have a bit of a north-south split in our forecast at the moment. That's because it's a cloudy picture across many northern areas with outbreaks of rain, some of these heavy in places. Further south, though, a drier, sunnier picture, particularly across southern England and Wales and also Northern Ireland. Watch out for a few showers across parts of Wales and southwest England, perhaps. Also, a decent amount of sunshine across the far north of Scotland today. Temperatures a little bit on the low side, ranging from 8 or 9 Celsius in the north to around 12 or 13 Celsius further south. As we go through this evening and overnight, we're going to see a bit more cloud and some further outbreaks of rain for a time across northern parts, but most of the rain clearing away. Some clearer skies towards the south, but then our attention turns to this swathe of wet and windy weather pushing its way up from the southwest. This will lift our temperatures, so a relatively mild start in the southwest, chillier further north and east, some frost likely across parts of Scotland. So a reversal in our fortunes as we go through Thursday. Across many northern parts, it's looking largely dry and there'll be some bright sunny weather around, but a wet and windy day ahead across more southern areas. The rain will be heavy at times, some gales likely, so we could see some disruption to travel and other impacts as well. Temperatures, well, they're going to be relatively academic because of the unsettled weather in the south and a little bit on the cool side further north.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's on your teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Very good morning to you. It is about to turn. It's just gone 7 o'clock, Wednesday, the 15th of November. You're tuned into Breakfast with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Thank you for your company, wherever you are, wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching. Leading the news, Suella Braverman, crisis for the Prime Minister, as his former Home Secretary accuses him of betraying the country and backtracking on a deal that they had between each other.
It comes as the government awaits a final judgment from the Supreme Court on their flagship Rwanda plans.
There's significant dilemmas for Sir Keir Starmer as well, as he threatens to sack shadow ministers who disobey him on the Israel-Hamas war.
Elsewhere, good news is expected any second now. Inflation figures about to drop. We're expecting them to fall below 5% for the first time in 2 years. We'll have the very latest with Liam Halligan in just a moment.
We also will have the weather picture here with the tease, because he likes doing that, Alex Burkle.
Good morning. It's a cloudy and wet day across northern parts, drier and brighter in the south, before some wet and windy weather arrives tomorrow. I'll have more shortly.
And Paul Coyte's here with all your sport.
Morning. Novak Djokovic loses for the first time since Wimbledon. Also, VAR could be a good thing. And I've got the future of sport. It's kids versus mascots. That's what I want to see more of.
The mind is
That's
boggling.
what I'll show you.
OK, we look forward to that. Thank you very much indeed. Your views, very welcome. GB Views at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GB News.
So we start this hour with some breaking news, and in the last few seconds we have heard that inflation has fallen dramatically to 4.6% for the month of October. It follows 2 months of inflation staying still at 6.7%.
Now, having that figure is one of the Prime Minister's key pledges, which he's promised to achieve by the end of the year. To meet his goal, inflation needs to fall to 5.3% by Christmas. So are we, Liam Halligan, are we beyond that then already?
That's actually wrong, with huge respect, Eamonn. Yeah. Inflation was 10.1% in January 2023 when he made that pledge, consumer price index inflation. So in terms of the parlour game of economics, it has to be below 5%, and now it is. What does this mean for ordinary people? It means that prices aren't going down, but they're going up less quickly than they have in a couple of years. This also means that interest rates have probably peaked. I doubt we're going to get another interest rate rise now because of this quite dramatic reduction in inflation, and that means mortgage rates are going to come down quite sharply. We've already seen that in the last couple of days. The speculation about this figure has grown. Why has inflation come down so sharply? It's mainly because energy prices were very high last autumn, and the Ofgem energy price cap, which regulates our combined electricity and gas bills for households, that dropped at the beginning of October. That's like a regulatory change in order to try and rein in energy prices. So that was always going to bring inflation down this month. But look, this is good news for households. I wouldn't say this is the end of the cost of living crisis, but I'd say it's the beginning of the end of the cost of living crisis. I'd say that politics now is going to focus a lot more on how do we get growth going.
You see, when you say this is the beginning of the end sort of thing, Ukraine, Russia's still happening, fallouts from Brexit still happening, and whatever's going on in the Middle East still happening. So I wouldn't be being very confident about...
I'm not, Eamonn, and every single time I talk about this, I qualify it. Every single time I write about it, I qualify it. And when I get time on television, when I'm granted the space to speak, then I talk about it. There is a big danger that this autumn we could see another energy price surge, not least because of geopolitics, as you say. The OPEC oil exporters cartel is working closely with the Russians now to keep oil prices relatively high. And, of course, our gas supplies are vulnerable to anything that the Russians want to do to alter gas prices on global markets. So we are vulnerable, but that notwithstanding, if we do have a decent winter, if energy prices do stay relatively under control, and they look to be doing that for now, then this is good news. This means that mortgage holders aren't going to have to weather another increase in borrowing costs, and those borrowing costs have been huge. So this should mean that the economy starts growing a bit better, a bit more investment. This is good economic news, notwithstanding your qualifications, Eamonn.
And a bit of political capital for the Prime Minister at a time of crisis when Suella Braverman's all over the headlines. But I just want to talk in the context of those employment figures and those wages figures that we got yesterday. People seeing their wages go up by 7.7%, which is a real terms gain of just 1% or something, given where inflation was. But going forward, this could be a more significant improvement for people, more money in their pocket.
We've got to be careful. Those headline wage numbers, they're averages. So some people get higher wage rises, but by definition, half of people get less than that. And I got an awful lot of emails from GB News viewers and listeners yesterday after we talked about those wage numbers saying, I don't know anybody that's got a wage rise of 7-odd%. You're right, though. The wage increase on average was ahead of inflation. Now it would be even more ahead of inflation, which means that what we say in real terms, actually purchasing power, what you can buy in the shops, consumers should feel better off. But again, these are averages, and in economics, averages can be like a tyranny. People live in their lives, they don't live the average life.
But on the face of it, good news, and we'll take it in the current climate.
Absolutely.
Liam, thanks very much indeed.
Right, but how will all of this impact businesses bearing the brunt of cost rises? Let's go to Will Hollis. He's in Market Harborough with some shop owners there. I was in Market Harborough just a couple of weeks ago. Very nice place, very, very nice. Will, good morning to you.
Good morning. Yeah, a very nice place and a very nice market as well. This is the kind of place where the public will be trying to save a little bit of money, maybe, and with inflation a little bit lower than it has been recently, they might be coming to a place like Susan's shop here at Harborough Market Refills. Most people, when they think about refills, they'll be thinking about the environment, but with high inflation, which is a little bit lower now, where does your business fit into all of this?
We've seen a significant change in the kind of customer that's coming through the door. At first, when we very first opened sort of 3 to 5 years ago, people were coming because they wanted the eco-sustainability credentials, the zero waste. Now we're finding people are coming here because it's affordable shopping. They can buy just the amount they need. They're able to make their budget stretch longer. If they want half a tub of nuts, they can have half a tub of nuts. If a pensioner comes in and says they want to make a flapjack, they have their 30 grams of this, their 50 grams of that. And it leaves them enough money to go around to the cafe and have a full breakfast and a cup of coffee with their friends. So it's a good way of spreading income, it's a sociable way of shopping, and it's really catching on.
And there might be a little bit more money in their pockets with inflation lower this month. What's your reaction to inflation lowering, and what will it mean for the customers that are choosing to come here instead of the supermarkets?
I was expecting a lowering in inflation. The dizzy heights of the 19-20% straight away after the Ukraine crisis has been coming through in our supply chain as reducing. I didn't expect it to be as much of a reduction from the 6.7 to the 4 something that it is today. We have a slight theory here, which customers like to expound as well, is that there's the element of the shrinkflation, like the stealth hiding of inflation, is coming through. So we're noticing that some packaging is getting smaller. It's only really for packaged products. It doesn't affect refill because we buy in bulk. They pay for the weight they have. But certainly, I feel that a lot of the price is being absorbed by the suppliers. We certainly did when it went to 20%. We didn't pass it on. It's not fair to customers. I think everyone's being quite responsible about it, and we just celebrate and look forward to it coming back to where it was before all these crises.
the market isn't open yet. There's a social element to markets. You have conversations with people. It's not as easy as just going and buying something in a supermarket. You might have a few conversations, talk to people that you've known since you were young. How are people feeling right now as we might be looking towards the end, hopefully, of the cost of living crisis?
We're seeing more joy coming through the doors. Straight away after sort of COVID, and especially after the Ukraine, that everyone was very low. There was a lot of doom and gloom coming through. People are sort of skipping in the doors. It's a nice place for them to come. They're greeted. They go to the butcher's and they're, hello, mate, what would you like? They go to the fruit and veg, what would you like? They can go to the fish counter and get their fish. You know, we've got Sue's cheese stall around the corner. There's 2 Sues here. And, you know, they get pastoral care and companionship. Some people come in every single day. We have people come for their hug. We have people who come here because they get a hug. They tell us about their prescriptions, their medicines. They, you know, it's a community. There's 50, as I said, I don't know if I did say, 55,000 to 60,000 people come through that door a month. They're all greeted with a friendly atmosphere. They know they've got diverse products here. They can do a supermarket shop in here in the quantities that they need. Yeah.
And then a little bit of joy as well with the good news today that inflation's coming down. Yeah, Susan, thank you so much for speaking to us today on GB News. Market's clearly an important place for people across the country when supermarkets dominate our streets. Eamonn and Isabel.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate it. Thank you. The time, 7:10. Thank you for your company on this Wednesday morning. Our top story. It's the morning after an unprecedented backlash from the scorned former Home Secretary. Time to create maximum embarrassment for the Prime Minister.
Well, in the attack, she claimed the Prime Minister had failed to deliver on every single policy, and she spoke of their mysterious deal before labelling him weak.
This comes as a ruling on Rishi Sunak's flagship immigration policy will come from the Supreme Court later this morning. Our political correspondent Olivia Utley with more.
June 2022, and all eyes were glued to live coverage of a plane sat on the runway at Boscombe Down military base in Wiltshire. The Boeing 767 was scheduled to fly the first group of illegal migrants to Kigali, the capital of Rwanda. But after a few hours, it became clear that the plane and the migrants were going nowhere. Legal challenges, including one from the European Court of Human Rights, meant the small number of passengers on the plane had been whittled down to none at all. It was an embarrassing blow for the then government of Boris Johnson, who dreamt up the scheme to stop channel crossings. And since then, flights have been on hold as legal challenges progressed through the courts. But that hasn't dampened government enthusiasm for the policy, with current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak putting the plan at the centre of his Stop the Boats promise.
We will pass new laws to stop small boats, making sure that if you come to this country illegally, you are detained and swiftly removed.
Last December, there was some good news for the government when the High Court ruled that the plan was lawful. However, that decision was overturned 6 months later when appeal court judges decided that Rwanda is not a safe country. But the government has kept pushing. And today's judgment marks the end of this slow legal process, with the Supreme Court having to decide if the government is entitled to determine whether Rwanda is safe for migrants or not. Either way, Rishi Sunak has indicated that if he wins, he'll ignore any migrant appeals and injunctions from the ECHR, all of which mean the next flight might actually leave the runway. And that is when the true test would begin. But if the government loses, the last 3 years will have been for nothing. The small boats will keep coming, and the Rwanda policy will effectively be dead in the water. Olivia Utley, GB News.
OK, we're going to get some reaction to all of this now from the Reform UK Deputy Leader Ben Habib and the immigration lawyer Arjap Singh Bengal. Good morning to you both. Ben, let's start with you because I think we need to focus on exactly what this intervention from Suella Braverman means for Rishi Sunak. I mean, I know I bumped into you yesterday and you said you've been inundated with people trying to join Reform off the back of her sacking. Clearly a gain for you, but how on earth does the Prime Minister regain control of the narrative in this situation?
Well, I think the Prime Minister made a very definite decision that he was going to turn his back on the Brexit voters. And if you look at the policies that he let Suella down on, with the exception of the fourth one, which is on transgender ideology, the rest of them are all actually giving effect to Brexit. So he's turned his back on Brexit. He's turned his back on Brexit voters. He's turned his back on the Red Wall. He's brought back the Remain voting, Remain campaigning former Prime Minister David Cameron. And this is effectively the end, if you like, of the parliamentary pushback against Brexit. And what we're now going to see is a government that continues to align itself with the European Union, and his electoral strategy is going to be going after, therefore, the Liberal Democrat votes and not the Red Wall. He's giving up on centre-right Conservative policies. He's tacking further to the left. The Conservative Party was already over to the left. He's gone further left, and he's going to go after that Liberal Democrat vote.
The new chairman of the party yesterday, who himself he described as a Red Wall MP, and he denied this lurch to the right. I think obviously people can make their own minds up, but I suppose my question is, you know, how on earth do the Conservatives govern for the next year or however long it is until the election when they have somebody like Suella Braverman making this unprecedented criticism of the leader of the party? I mean, do you think that there is an argument, for example, you know, clearly not your own views, but do you think it is a legitimate argument that she could have the whip withdrawn just for being so... It was like a character assassination. Never seen anything like it in politics before.
Brilliant. It was brilliant, that's what it was. It was theatre. It was better than panto season.
It was. I mean, the last couple of days have been unbelievable political theatre, absolutely. And then, you know, punctuated with Suella Braverman's excoriating letter, ripping Sunak apart. But we all know Sunak is weak. We've all seen him equivocate. We've all seen him make promises and turn his back on them. He seems to think that doing nothing is the best strategy at the moment. But as you've indicated, Isabel, he's going to go into next year basically with a party that's ungovernable. He now has a lot of enemies within his parliamentary party, and they're going to make life as difficult as possible for him. I mean, the election, forget the election. He is toast in the next election. He was already facing great difficulty. He's just lost a whole load of Red Wall voters. And as far as Richard Holden is concerned, Richard needs to look at his own majority. I think he's got a majority in Durham somewhere of just over 1,000 votes. Richard Holden will not be an MP after the next election.
Okay. Well, let's go to Harjap now and find out what do you think, what way, Harjap, do you think the Supreme Court ruling will go today? And if so, what is the repercussion for the Prime Minister?
Well, I think we can't really second judge which way the ruling's going to go. There are rumours started out yesterday that perhaps the government is going to lose. Either way, in Suella's letter, she seems to try and be covering all bases, claiming it's not my fault, Governor, sort of approach, that if we win, we still can't enforce it. Well, then why have you been pursuing this policy? And she seems to be saying that, I wasn't supported. But you're a barrister, and you have a knowledge. You've had the highest legal job in the country before. Your friends are judges. Your friends and colleagues are barristers. You've had a whole army of government lawyers at your disposal, and yet you've not managed to get one single flight off the ground. In fact, Suella Braverman and Home Secretaries have been to Rwanda more time than any migrant has. So I think we have to have that, even if the government win, because technically the Supreme Court said that sending people to a third country was okay. However, they just weren't happy with that Rwanda would be that country and that would be safe. And the assurances given by Rwanda weren't good enough. So technically, the government could tweak this policy and bring it back if they can convince that Rwanda is a country and give the Supreme Court assurances, or they can use another country. However, the problem is when a certain deal was negotiated, we didn't have any return agreements. So we don't have return agreements with a lot of other countries. We've only got 6 in the past 7 years. Yeah. So we can't return people to countries where we don't have return agreements. And this is a policy that Suella has championed. And now all of a sudden she's saying, covering all bases, throwing her toys out the pram, like a little child, her letter was, blaming Rishi. And I think Rishi's realised that perhaps going the Suella way isn't going to win him an election. And now he's just going to try and do things his way with his team. Ben might be absolutely right. He probably is toast at the next election, but he's probably thinking, if I'm going to be toast, at least I can try and do it on my terms without trying to keep everyone happy. At least give it a go as such and move towards a little bit towards a more centre and try and get that centre Labour vote and that centre Liberal Democrat vote to try and shore up some sort of defence of the election.
Yeah, I mean, and you might be right that he is trying to win an election on more centre ground, but he may face problems. I'm reading reports that if the Supreme Court ruling doesn't find in favour of the government, there could be up to 60 MPs who call for the PM to pull out of the ECHR. What do you make of that? I mean, do you think that's a realistic option for the government as a plan B?
I think Suella was banking on this. So Suella was probably banking on losing, and then her rallying cry would have been, let's leave the ECHR. And I think the only way to push this policy through is going to be to try and leave the ECHR if the government lose, or they can go back to the drawing board and try and tweak it. There's no way a flight is going to go before the next election. I can tell you that now. So there's no flights that are going to go to Rwanda, which means 140 million. All of this posturing that Suella's done has all been a waste of time. Waste of legal fees. We'd never had the capacity in Rwanda anyway. There's only about 500 places in Rwanda. And out of that, we've signed an agreement with the Rwandan government that we have to take 200 people back from them. So we only have a net of 300 people. Now, you can send 300 people to Rwanda. Is that going to deter the other 49,700 that are crossing the channel? And where are you going to put them? The barges have been a failure. They haven't worked either. So none of what the government is saying is working, and they perhaps need to go to a realistic policy and realise, well, we should stop selling dreams to the British public, because ultimately that's what this has been.
Well, we'll find out if it's a dream or a nightmare later on this morning. Gentlemen, thank you both very, very much indeed. We here at GB News will keep you up to date on that Rwanda Supreme Court ruling as we bring you special coverage throughout the day on what is happening.
Yeah, we're expecting that at around 9:45, 10 o'clock, and that rolling coverage will begin from 9:30. Let's take a look at some of the other stories coming into the newsroom this morning. And 5 men and 3 women have been found guilty of abusing children following a trial that's believed to have been the largest prosecution of a child abuse ring in Scotland.
The court heard that 4 of those children, all under the age of 13, were introduced to a world of drugs where they were exposed to sexual abuse and violence.
The offences included rape, attempted murder and assault. Police said the victims had suffered a horrific ordeal.
Israel says its military is carrying out a targeted operation against Hamas in Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City.
This is the first time the military's directly entered Gaza's biggest and most important hospital since the war broke out.
Israel has consistently argued that the hospital is being used by Hamas as a base, which the terrorist organisation have denied.
Hundreds of people living in a tower block in Bristol were told to leave their homes immediately after major structural faults were discovered.
Bristol City Council declared a major incident after building surveys showed Barton House would be unsafe if a fire or explosion happened.
Well, the council said residents were told to pack enough clothes for a day or two and to stay with family and friends where possible.
Well, that doesn't make it safe after a day or two. Interesting. NHS Chief Executive has pledged to wipe out all cervical cancer cases in England by 2040.
There's now a drive to boost the uptake of both cervical screening and the HPV vaccine.
Cervical cancer affects 3,200 women, killing 850 every year in Britain. Halligan here in the studio, and Liam, we're just reflecting on the news that broke at 7 o'clock about the inflation figures. Just recap and tell people what's gone on.
Just drilling down into some of the numbers here. So inflation is now 4.6% in October. So that means prices on average are 4.6% higher than they were this month last year. Inflation in October 2022 was up at 11.1%. So we're a long way down from the peak. Food prices are not anywhere near going down. Food price inflation is still 10.1% during the year to October. Food prices, in fact, the Office for National Statistics say, on average, are 30% higher than October 2021. a huge increase, which many shoppers will recognise. So where is this lower inflation in October coming from? As I say, 4.6%. It's coming from fuel prices, Eamonn and Isabel. Gas is 31% down in October 2023 compared to October last year. Electricity is 16% down. That reflects the fact that the Ofgem energy price cap has come down at the beginning of last month. Petrol prices are also down, petrol and diesel prices. Motor fuels in general, says the OMS, are 7.6% down during the year to October 2023. So some good news there. So it's really food price inflation, which is why inflation is still relatively high in this country compared to other countries.
And we'll be drilling into exactly why food inflation is so sticky with Liam a little bit later on in the programme.
Meanwhile, let's get the weather picture. Alex Burkle with that.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Alex Burkle here with your latest GB News weather update. Ahead of some wet and windy weather arriving tomorrow, we have a bit of a north-south split in our forecast at the moment. That's because it's a cloudy picture across many northern areas with outbreaks of rain, some of these heavy in places. Further south, though, a drier, sunnier picture, particularly across southern England and Wales and also Northern Ireland. Watch out for a few showers across parts of Wales and southwest England, perhaps. Also, a decent amount of sunshine across the far north of Scotland today. Temperatures a little bit on the low side, ranging from 8 or 9 Celsius in the north to around 12 or 13 Celsius further south. As we go through this evening and overnight, we're going to see a bit more cloud and some further outbreaks of rain for a time across northern parts, but most of the rain clearing away. Some clearer skies towards the south, but then our attention turns to this swathe of wet and windy weather pushing its way up from the southwest. This will lift our temperatures, so a relatively mild start in the southwest. Chillier further north and east, some frost likely across parts of Scotland. So a reversal in our fortunes as we go through Thursday. Across many northern parts, it's looking largely dry and there'll be some bright sunny weather around, but a wet and windy day ahead across more southern areas. The rain will be heavy at times, some gales likely, so we could see some disruption to travel and other impacts as well. Temperatures, well, they're going to be relatively academic because of the unsettled weather in the south and a little bit on the cool side further north.
OK, stay with us. In a moment, we're asking, should child killers get longer life sentences? We'll be debating it in just a moment.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
We've had a terrible story come out of Scotland about sexual abuse on young children, which we'll be returning to later in the programme. And the appeal hearing of child killer John Venables is underway. It ends today.
And Olivia Pratt-Corbell's murderer, Thomas Cashman, starts his hearing later today. So we're asking, is enough enough, frankly?
Should anyone who murders a child automatically get a longer life sentence?
Well, we're joined this morning by the social campaigner and entrepreneur, Winston Davies. He believes longer sentences are the way forward, but...
Psychotherapist and social worker Trish Barry-Relf thinks the priority should be support, not further punishment. And Trish, however laudable that sentiment is, can you offer that same support, that same understanding, that same kindness, that same hand to rehabilitation to psychopaths?
Good morning. So the first thing I would like to say is that nothing that Venables says is an excuse for his crime. I would also like to extend my deepest sympathy to Jamie Bolger's parents, because this must be a very difficult time when this is whipped up. When there is a parole hearing with Venables being considered for release. What I would like to say is that children as young as 10, which Venables was at the time, are seriously disturbed to carry out the killing of a 2-year-old child. I think the questions societally are around the welfare principle and children, because they were children at 10. Are they perceived as needing and receiving protection from the consequences of their immaturity? We know since 1963 that the age of criminal responsibility in the UK is 10. The UK is also a signatory to the UN Rights of the Child, which has criticised the low rate of criminal responsibility, one of the lowest in Europe. In Norway, it's 15. In other countries, it's 12 to 14. And the recommendations are it should be 12 to 14.
Okay, well, let's hear Winston Davies, who's in the studio here. Winston is a social campaigner. He's an entrepreneur. He's turned his life around in many ways. You're hearing what Trish is saying, the vibes that she's giving out towards understanding these killers. What would you say?
Look, I'm a massive believer in rehabilitation. I was in prison 15 years ago for cannabis, rehabilitated, turned my life around and whatnot. And definitely, people should be offered support and counselling, all of that. But for me, there's a line that we get to, and when you've killed children, serious sexual offences, murder, Like, there's a point where people have got to say, you know what, I've got to take the responsibility for my actions and live with the consequence of it. And I kind of feel like you get to a point where how much can you actually go back? How much can you rehabilitate when you've crossed that line? And for me, that 42 years that Cashman's trying to appeal, I think that's lenient. If someone comes into my house and kills my kids, I'm not really talking about prison.
Right. What are you talking about?
If someone comes into my house and killed one of my children, I would want them gone.
Yeah. I mean, Trish, that you can understand from a parent's point of view, many parents would feel absolutely the same. In the case of Venables, I'm fascinated. He was a child when he committed murder. He was 10 years old. How on earth, having grown up behind bars, having had no experience of normal life, apart from taking another life, how on earth can you be rehabilitated and capable of entering into a normal society situation where you're supposed to hold down a job and live in a house? He hasn't grown up in any normal sense. Surely he can't be released.
Well, I mean, that is the responsibility of the services. They are there to rehabilitate, to provide support. If we look at the history, Venables had an assessment by the clinical psychologist who identified that he didn't have any internalized model of how to set his own boundaries. There was a lot of dysfunctional family dynamics, and he wasn't provided with the role modeling that he needed to be able to manage his behavior. His impulse control was poor, there was neuropsychological difficulties, and he was truanting from school, which is why he was in the shopping centre that day. So, I mean, these are all issues that are a grave concern to us as a society, because children are the responsibility of their parents. Now, I understand that Venables' parents were by his side and they've had to have a change of identity too. But I think the question has to be, these are very rare occurrences. And if an adult commits a crime, they serve their time and they usually can be rehabilitated and they can be on licence for life. And certainly with Venables, he will be on the sex abuse offenders register, and there is very stringent risk criteria around the management of that and the assessment of risk. Now, when he was released at 18, he was deemed to be a trivial risk. I suppose the question needs to be asked, as you quite rightly say, at 18, if he's been institutionalised in a prison regime, what experience did he have of the world and who prepared him for release? Even with children in care, we have laws whereby you need to support them up to age 23, because children from 18 to 23...
Time dictates that I've got to cut in on you here and give Winston the last word. You've heard what Trish is saying. At 18, he's deemed to be a trivial risk.
Look, I think that case is, like I said, a unique case. They were kids when they committed the murder. I think that even since they've been released from prison, there's been instances where they've committed more offences and shown that they're basically gone beyond repair, I think. And at the end of the day, if you've gone that far, again, there's no coming back for me.
Well, that's what Winston and Trish think this morning. We thank both of our contributors and we ask you at home, let us know what you think on this highly controversial issue.
Let's get up to date with the sport with the time. It's 7:36. Paul Coit with us this morning. Paul.
Howard Webb, the chief of referees, did his mic'd up show yesterday and was talking about the Newcastle goal against Arsenal, which happened a couple of weeks ago, which made Mikel Arteta so crazy, so annoyed. Said the whole of VAR was ridiculous and he was having a go at everybody apart from us. I think we're the only people he didn't have a go at during this. But anyway, Howard Webb went through all the decisions that were made when Newcastle, Anthony Gordon, scored this goal, because there were 4 different events that happened leading up to it that looked like they could have been penalised, and they played out the audio of the referees talking to VAR, and I've got to say, from what I saw yesterday and what I heard, it was all very impressive. The pressure they must have been under.
Would it be enough for Mikel Arteta to issue an apology and say, look, I'm really sorry, I realise these guys are under a lot of pressure, but you know what, they got it right?
What do you think? I don't think so either.
No.
I think not either. Mikhail, what do you got to say about it? It's, you know,
Do you not think he looks like Captain Black from Captain Scarlet?
Ridiculously so.
With the hair.
Well, yeah, I've thought that all along. Because the thing is, as he walks on the pitch, you get these big rings circles go across there, which is very... I know, it's very bizarre. Yeah, I know.
I always think about him.
Yeah, I think so too.
Right, Djokovic loses in the ATP finals.
He does. Novak Djokovic, 19 wins. I mean, 36 years old, and still he continues to win. And the last loss he had was at Wimbledon. There he's yesterday playing the ATP finals in Turin, or Torino, as we like to call it, of course. Lost in 4 sets at home. I say at home because it was Yannick Sinner, Italian, so the whole crowd was behind Sinner, and Novak did not like it. See the little clap there he was giving? That was sarcasm, because they were all cheering him and he did not like it. But anyway, it's a fantasy. He's only 22, Yannick Sinner, so a brilliant performance from him.
It's amazing how they can put those floors down. I remember going to see indoor tennis at the Royal Albert Hall, and how they were able to put that blue floor down.
Oh, it's great, isn't it?
Absolutely incredible.
I think it's a shame it's not the O2 anymore, because it was over here and now they've moved it to Turin, which is where it's going to be for a while.
You promised me last time out, you've got mascots against kids.
Future of sport,
And this is an American football.
It is. See, you like me, and I love all sport, obviously, but NFL... I still have a slight problem with. I still have a slight problem. But this could make us more interested. So what they do, this is in Minnesota. Now, I'll tell you what, these are nasty. These mascots are supposed to be nice. They play against the kids. Luckily, that they're all padded up there with helmets. But look at these mascots. So they actually play a game of American football. Now, watch this. Now, look at them for crying out loud. I mean, it's just disgraceful.
Pull his tail.
I know. That's all you got to do. Pull his head off. That's all you've got to do. Look at this. So anyway, this is a thing that I would love to see over here. But
I'm like you. I'm interested. I think this is good. This has a future.
There you go.
This has.
Look at the unicorn. Take out the unicorn. The unicorn's jumped over the kid's head, has managed to score a touchdown. Honestly, these are not nice mascots. As for the pig here, look at this.
Saturday Night TV has just been reinvented.
I know. I had my money on the hot dog taking the kid down, but there we are. So look, this is the future of American sport, and that would make me more interested. There you go. The kid's got pull the tail. That's what the tail's there for.
Yeah.
Maybe they're always told, leave the animal's tail alone. Look at this.
Thanks,
look at the
Paul.
lion.
Thank you very much indeed. Cheered us up there. Tremendous.
A little bit of breaking news to bring you. The Prime Minister's been speaking in the last few minutes. He's been talking about inflation down to 4.6 this morning. He says official figures released confirm we have halved inflation. This is meeting the first of my 5 priorities that I set out at the beginning of the year. He says it's down to hard decisions and fiscal discipline.
Let's see how good he'll do with the migrants at 9 or 10 o'clock
the other 4 pledges.
This morning with that one. We're going to talk about fasting. It's all the rage. People are doing it. Fasting for 14 hours a day could be very good for you, but could you do it? Asking that next.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are going through the papers this morning in the company of Candice Holdsworth and Christopher Biggins. And Candice, I want to start with you, which is a story about chickenpox vaccines. This is to be given on the NHS, or there are calls for it. Tell us more.
Yeah, so this is a story in the Times, and it kind of marks a shift in how we're going to be dealing with chickenpox. So I think the conventional wisdom used to be, let it spread around, let people get it, develop natural immunity. But now I think that what they want to do, what sort of health chiefs are recommending, is that kids should be routinely vaccinated against it, which is more in line with what they do in America. One of the things they said, the reason that they want to do this is because the pandemic sort of stopped it spreading around naturally. So fewer people are getting it when they're younger, and instead they're getting it when they're older.
And it could be much more dangerous.
Much worse.
I got both of my children vaccinated. You can already do this, but you have to go to your pharmacy and pay, I think it was £70, and you get the 2 vaccines. But I just didn't have the time in my life to be able to take 2 weeks off work.
Yeah.
And also just through friends, I heard that chickenpox is really quite traumatic, and it can obviously lead to scarring. But the kids really are uncomfortable, and I just did not need the stress. So I knew that the vaccine was safe. I knew that it's part of the traditional routine in many other countries. So I think this is brilliant.
But you're so right about that, about 2 weeks, because my older son caught it and then his younger brother got it. I mean, that was about a month of being almost housebound with 2 children who had it.
Horrendous, yeah. I also wanted my daughter to have the vaccine because if she hadn't caught it as a child, to get chickenpox when you're pregnant is so much more dangerous. And I just wanted to know it wasn't a problem for her going forward.
I had no idea about it. I mean, just how dangerous it can be.
Yeah. Well, it can lead to shingles as well.
It can. If you've had chickenpox, you've got about a 70% chance of getting shingles and later on in life.
I've had the shingles jab.
Yes, you got that?
I think when you're 70 you can get it, I think. It's brilliant. I mean, I've known people with shingles. It is horrendous.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like all sorts of things. You think, you know, as long as you don't get it, and why should you get it, whatever it is. And today I've woken up with a sty in my eye here, which is as if I've been punched in the
stress
in the left eye. The stress of Isabel.
A gold ring. Anyone got a gold ring on them?
Oh, yes.
You rub that on, and that helps enormously.
I'll keep my rings to myself, thank you.
Yes, that's right. My mum. That's charming. Honestly, give your friend a ring.
Christopher, what about Nigel Farage in I'm a Celebrity? You were the king.
I was the king a few years ago, and I'm thrilled. I love the series. I think it's a great booking, Nigel. I mean, I think he'll be terrific, especially as he's getting reportedly £1.5 million for it. which is not bad for a little payout.
See, they're politicians. Hancock being there created headlines, but nothing else, because I don't think it has rehabilitated him, or people would think of him differently as a result. Farage wants to go in there and reach out to young people, that young people will see him as cool and electable.
Yeah, well, but I think they will. I think he has a charm about him.
See, why would you say that? A lot of people will just be prepared to not like Nigel Farage right from the outset. Have you met him?
I've met him, and he's impressive, you know, and I think he'll come over very well. I don't think he'll win, but I think he'll do well. I mean, he will obviously be voted in to do all the terrible things that the public want him to do.
Yes.
But I think he'll come out as a... I mean, I love here, Danny Baker says Farage is not just panto, he's poisonous, cunning and dangerous.
Right.
Which is probably correct. Thing is, I think that Josie Gibson from
definitely she's top of my pop.
Yeah, she'll win. I'm convinced. But there are some, you know, I think Grace Dent, the food critic, is a very good choice. I think.
I've never heard of Grace Dent. Who is Grace Dent?
Well, she's famous for being a food critic. And she's very funny and very dry. And I think she'll be good in there, because I think she'll be good, I think. And then we've got Fred, First Dates.
Siriu.
Yes. Oh, I think...
said to be quite politically opposed to
Farage, I know.
Fireworks there.
And in this article, they're saying that the public, there's a real backlash about having Nigel in there.
I think, do you know what, I think it's really different about Nigel Farage and other sort of poster boys or poster girls of the right of centre. You know, when you compare him to Suella Braverman, he has a charm.
Oh, absolutely.
And he has a twinkle in his eye that has won him a lot of support, I think, over the years. And I think that will probably shine through on Strictly. Whereas somebody like Suella, you know, a lot of people find...
It's not on Strictly.
Sorry, not Strictly. You know what I mean. I'm a celebrity. Forgive me. The other big reality show.
You'd be good on Strictly, though, could you?
You'd probably be good on Strictly. But what I'm trying to point to is that, you know, yes, he's getting a few people's backs up, but he possesses a certain charm that other people from the right probably don't have, and possibly couldn't be as successful on a popular mainstream show like this. So
Absolutely,
I think it's fascinating.
I think he's. Having said, you know, you meet him and you can only go by that, and I've loved him. He's been terrific.
Yeah.
Very good, and good luck to him. But I don't think he'll win. Sam Thompson, I think, is a good choice.
I think he could be very successful.
Yeah.
I follow him on social media. He's very funny.
Very funny. Charming.
No, I don't
he's
know
from
who
Made in Chelsea.
He's a disc jockey.
He's a DJ, radio DJ, and he's also in a relationship with an ex-Love Islander, so he's a reality darling.
Yes.
But he is funny, and he's very self-deprecating, which always goes down well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he could do well. But Josie Gibson's our choice, isn't it, Eamonn?
She is. I do genuinely love Josie.
I do too.
It's my dream to present breakfast telly. With
Yeah, well, that could come true.
Candice, what is Rishi Sunak going to do if the Supreme Court judgment goes against the Rwanda plan this morning?
So this is in the Times. Contra to Suella Braverman, apparently they do have a plan B if the court judgment goes against them. What they'll try and do is they may just do a bit of legal wrangling, basically. So, I mean, they might try and elevate it to a treaty ratified by Parliament, which would disapply the human rights laws, or they could try and address some of the inadequacies identified by the court. But it seems that that's what they'll do. They'll sort of do all the legal nitty-gritty rather than say maybe a radical departure from the ECHR, which Sunak just doesn't seem to want to do. So that'll be interesting to see what they do.
I have a feeling, just from what Suella said in her letter, that they're expecting this to be an unsuccessful hearing.
I love, why do you keep calling her Suella for? You don't say Teresa, but Theresa May.
I know. It's just something about
Rishi and Suella. This is a younger person type thing as well, whereas we went to schools we were called by your surname all the time.
Absolutely.
No, I agree. I do agree with you. I've just fallen into the trap. I think it's because there's always the play on her name.
But I think it also is your relationship with these people, is it? Because you are very friendly with them.
Of course. They're right in the centre of things, darling.
It's true. I use first names a lot to refer to them, whereas you look at, during Margaret Thatcher, everyone always said Mrs. Thatcher.
Mrs. T.
Yeah, you wouldn't be saying Margaret. Well, Maggie, what about you?
But surnames for criminals, for sure.
Oh, definitely. that really irks me. Yeah, how we get people who have been you know, like, say, John Venables today, if we would have young people writing stories here saying, John has been serving whatever, you know, he doesn't deserve to be called by a Christian name.
No.
But that's the thing. Now,
No name.
Fasting, Christopher, fasting for 14 hours a day, which obviously you don't do, it can be very good for your health. I know a lot of people who do it.
I know a lot of people who do it, and it's very successful. I mean, you just got to be, unfortunately, you have to look at the time all the time. Before you eat or before you start, you can't think, oh, I'll have something now to eat. You've got to keep those 14 hours free.
You see, I think I do this every day unintentionally. I eat with the kids quite early, then I go to bed, and I don't eat generally till I come off air. So sometimes it's 11 o'clock in the morning. I haven't done the maths, but a pretty decent wedge of time. But I was told if I have milk in my tea or my coffee, and anyone who works with me knows I guzzle through the teas and coffees to keep me alive, that breaks the fast. So
oh, does it?
Yeah,
because it's milk.
Yeah,
it's milk.
Then sets your digestive system going.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really count. So I don't eat for all these hours. That explains why I'm not feeling the benefits after all these years of eating for hours and hours.
I tell you, as you approach 75, which you all know I am, I find that I do eat less.
Yes, yeah.
And also, I don't eat meat so much. I'm not a fan of...
heavy stuff that you're going to digest.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly.
That's when the body gives up the will to live.
Yeah.
And it's really say, don't bother me with all this extra work to do. Just let me die in peace.
No, I won't say no to a plain chocolate biscuit.
Yeah.
And a cup of tea.
Or 5.
Or 5. Or a packet.
Well,
if you fast 14 hours, I think the theory is you can pretty much eat what you want after that.
Yeah, but 14 hours.
I don't think it works that way.
No, I don't think so. Not for us, is it, Eamonn?
There's just always fads, and I just wonder, you know, in like 10 years, what will we be saying next, you know?
You know, just do what's been done for a million years on the Mediterranean, which is a little bit of moderation. Glass of wine here, dollop of butter.
Yeah, and olive oil.
Yeah. All right, I'm sorry, I haven't heard the count while we're doing for time. Oh, we're almost out of time. Perfect. All right, Christopher and Candice, we'll see you again just after 8:30. But now here's Alex Burkle with your Wednesday forecast.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Alex Burkle here with your latest GB News weather update. Ahead of some wet and windy weather arriving tomorrow, we have a bit of a north-south split in our forecast at the moment. That's because it's a cloudy picture across many northern areas with outbreaks of rain, some of these heavy in places. Further south, though, a drier, sunnier picture, particularly across southern England and Wales and also Northern Ireland. Watch out for a few showers across parts of Wales and southwest England, perhaps. Also, a decent amount of sunshine across the far north of Scotland today. Temperatures a little bit on the low side, ranging from 8 or 9 Celsius in the north to around 12 or 13 Celsius further south. As we go through this evening and overnight, we're going to see a bit more cloud and some further outbreaks of rain for a time across northern parts, but most of the rain clearing away. Some clearer skies towards the south, but then our attention turns to this swathe of wet and windy weather pushing its way up from the southwest. This will lift our temperatures, so a relatively mild start in the southwest, chillier further north and east, some frost likely across parts of Scotland. So a reversal in our fortunes as we go through Thursday. Across many northern parts, it's looking largely dry and there'll be some bright sunny weather around, but a wet and windy day ahead across more southern areas. The rain will be heavy at times, some gales likely, so we could see some disruption to travel and other impacts as well. Temperatures, well, they're going to be relatively academic because of the unsettled weather in the south and a little bit on the cool side further north.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hello there, very good morning. Good to see you. 8 o'clock. The time is approaching on this Wednesday, the 15th of November. You tuned into Breakfast. Eamonn and Isabel here.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. How do you solve a problem like Suella? It's crisis for the Prime Minister as his former Home Secretary accuses him of betraying the nation and backtracking on their secret deal. Olivia Utley will have more from Westminster.
Suella Braverman's excoriating letter has sent shockwaves around Westminster. But the question now is, does the Home Secretary really have the support to whip up real problems for the Prime Minister?
All of this comes as the government awaits a final judgment from the Supreme Court. We'll be there after 9 o'clock this morning on the flagship Rwanda plans. Mark White, let's go to him for the latest. Mark?
Well, the Boris Johnson announcement was 19 months ago, this Rwanda deal. Today it is crunch day, but if that Supreme Court decision goes against the government, well, to quote the former Home Secretary, there is no plan B.
In other news this morning, 7 members of a Glasgow paedophile gang have been found guilty of running a monstrous child sex abuse ring. The judge described their offences as the depths of human depravity.
Elsewhere, inflation's fallen to 4.6%. That's the lowest rate for 2 years, and it puts the government on track to meet its target to halve inflation by the end of the year.
And Alex Burke will have your forecast.
Good morning. It's a cloudy and wet day across northern parts, drier and brighter in the south, before some wet and windy weather arrives tomorrow. I'll have more shortly.
And we'll have more of Paul with the sport.
Yes, VAR's been proved to be correct. What a shock. Aaron Ramsdale's dad is standing up for his son. And also, how about sin bins for football? I like the sound of it, Eamonn.
Yeah, we like the sound.
We do.
I think that's a good idea. And the period you would be in sin for would
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
10 minutes
Sounds
a time.
Good enough.
I think so.
Dissent, back chat to the referee. Would that also apply to fouls?
I think then we're looking at yellow cards, but I think even looking at the referee in a funny way is probably well. Yeah. Did you look at me funny? 10 minutes off the
Oh,
blitz.
dear, they'll have no one on pitch at that rate.
I know, just raising your eyebrow.
Respect.
In an offensive fashion.
OK, you can join and give us your view on sin bins or anything else. And indeed, are there other aspects of life which sin bins should be introduced
Absolutely.
for? Absolutely.
10-minute
agree
time
with you.
out. To my kids.
Yeah.
Sin bin.
GB Views at gbnews.com or you can tweet at GBNews.
Well, to our top story this morning, it's the morning after an unprecedented backlash from the scorned former Home Secretary, timed to create maximum embarrassment for the Prime Minister.
Well, in the attack, the Home Secretary claimed the Prime Minister had failed to deliver on every single policy, and she spoke of their mysterious deal before labelling Rishi Sunak as weak.
Well, this comes just as a ruling on Sunak's flagship immigration policy is expected from the Supreme Court later this morning. Our political correspondent Olivia Utley has more for us.
June 2022, and all eyes were glued to live coverage of a plane sat on the runway at Boscombe Down military base in Wiltshire. The Boeing 767 was scheduled to fly the first group of illegal migrants to Kigali, the capital of Rwanda. But after a few hours, it became clear that the plane and the migrants were going nowhere. Legal challenges, including one from the European Court of Human Rights, meant the small number of passengers on the plane had been whittled down to none at all. It was an embarrassing blow for the then government of Boris Johnson, who dreamt up the scheme to stop Channel crossings. And since then, flights have been on hold as legal challenges progressed through the courts. But that hasn't dampened government enthusiasm for the policy, with current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak putting the plan at the centre of his Stop the Boats promise.
We will pass new laws to stop small boats, making sure that if you come to this country illegally, you are detained and swiftly removed.
Last December, there was some good news for the government when the High Court ruled that the plan was lawful. However, that decision was overturned 6 months later when appeal court judges decided that Rwanda is not a safe country. But the government has kept pushing. And today's judgment marks the end of this slow legal process, with the Supreme Court having to decide if the government is entitled to determine whether Rwanda is safe for migrants or not. Either way, Rishi Sunak has indicated that if he wins, he'll ignore any migrant appeals and injunctions from the ECHR, all of which mean the next flight might actually leave the runway. And that is when the true test would begin. But if the government loses, the last 3 years will have been for nothing. The small boats will keep coming, and the Rwanda policy will effectively be dead in the water. Olivia Utley, GB News.
Well, let's get some thoughts now from our political correspondent Olivia Utley, as well as our Home Affairs editor Mark White. Starting with you, Olivia. I mean, the former Home Secretary talked once about her dream being to see that flight to Rwanda take off, and yet now she has become a nightmare herself for the Prime Minister. What on earth does he do now with her making comments like this on his backbenches?
Well, she really has become a nightmare for the Prime Minister. This 2-page letter that she published yesterday afternoon, she chose the timing for maximum effect. Apparently, the letter has been being drafted for days, but when all the headlines were taken up by David Cameron's appointment as Foreign Secretary, she wanted to wait to drop that bomb with as much impact as she possibly could. Now, the letter makes a series of pretty damning claims about the Prime Minister. First, she says that the Prime Minister, when he hired her as Foreign Secretary, she had some terms. She had 4 terms, and he agreed. There's apparently a piece of paper in which he has agreed in writing to take these terms seriously. She also says, and perhaps this is most damning of all, that the Prime Minister had no backup for if the Rwanda plan is deemed unlawful today. Now, insiders believe that it is really quite likely that the Supreme Court judgment could either deem the plan unlawful or at least deem elements of it unlawful. It's more complicated. Mark will get into it in detail in a bit. But if that's the case, if it is deemed unlawful and there is no plan B, then essentially the government has to go back to the drawing board on its central policy of stopping the boats. Since he took office, Rishi Sunak has talked over and over again about stopping the boats. We know that it is a top priority of voters in the UK. But Suella Braverman claims that although she pushed him to come up with an alternative option, he simply does not have anything to take its place if the Rwanda policy falls through. Now, James Cleverly, the new Home Secretary, has sort of denied that. He says that there are a number of mitigation proposals in place. They could perhaps rework the policy a little bit, although expert lawyers say that if the Supreme Court judgment is as damning as they expect, then reworking the policy probably won't work that well. They could use other countries. They could agree deals with Egypt is one of the options, perhaps. But of course, any other country would have exactly the same problems that the Rwanda policy has had and would go through another months and months and months of court wrangling. So there's no easy option for the Prime Minister if this court judgment fails. And the Home Secretary's attack could be very damning indeed, particularly if, as we're expecting in the next few hours and days, right-wing MPs start filing in behind her and put their weight behind her against the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's cross to Mark White, who is outside the Supreme Court this morning. The Court of Appeal already said that this plan was unlawful. 5 justices have been mulling it. What do we expect to hear from them a little bit later on today?
Well, the government is still hopeful. Remember, when that High Court decision was handed down in the summer, it wasn't unanimous. So if the 3 judges, 2 did declare it unlawful, but the Lord Chief Justice did say he believed that it was lawful. A big sticking point with this, according to the human rights lawyers and the charities, as well as some of the asylum seekers who brought this case in the first place, is the issue about whether someone being sent to Rwanda is going to get their asylum application properly assessed. And if it's not properly assessed, if there are not robust processes in place in Rwanda, what does that mean in terms of someone perhaps being sent back to their home country if it is an unsafe country? That's the big concern, certainly, that exercised the minds of those High Court judges. So let's see what the Supreme Court say when they hand down their judgment 10:30 this morning. But Olivia is right in quoting what Suella Braverman was saying. She said there is no plan B, and I think that is right. Everything that the government has planned so far hinges on Rwanda. Rwanda as being the deterrent that will put those people smugglers' business model out of action. They believe that if they can send hundreds, perhaps thousands of people to Rwanda in short order, then that breaks the business model. If there's not Rwanda, well, they're going to have to look around if they want to stick to that kind of game plan for another willing participant. I will say, though, some other countries around the world are looking at this model of third-party countries to take asylum seekers on as a way, perhaps, of stopping the illegal migration into their countries as well. So perhaps the government has something, but it may not be as clear-cut as just an unlawful ruling. It may ask for more safeguards around just how robust Rwanda's asylum processing procedures are. The one thing that, well, a few things go in its favour, but one of the main things that go in the favour of the Rwandan government is that they have been transparent throughout and have said that they are more than willing to have third-party oversight of the processes that they put into place around their asylum application processing to ensure that those third-party overseers are happy with the way that Rwanda is actually going about things.
Thank you very much indeed for the update, and we'll be back to Mark again before 9 o'clock this morning. These migrant issues have long raised questions about legitimacy and how real refugees make asylum applications.
We have the story for you this morning of Hamid Amiri. He was just 10 years old when he watched his mother give a speech in his hometown of Heart of Afghanistan.
She spoke out for women's rights in education against the Taliban. That same night, an order was given for her execution. Hamid Amiri joins us now to tell us that story. Was the order for her execution carried out, Hamid?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. No, luckily we managed to escape and get away.
Yeah. Now, to get away and to travel from Afghanistan to Britain, just put it into context for us. How long did that take you to be able to do?
18 months. And so many countries along the way, and so many moments that we thought we might not see the next day.
So how did you survive the 18 months? Tell us how straightforward or not the journey was.
I think the survival was hope and knowing we had to get to UK. And the reason UK was because of my older brother with a very rare congenital heart disease. The journey was hidden compartments and trusting the people you don't want to trust and getting robbed along the way, feeling like a parcel from one person to another, until finally you hope you get to your destination.
You talk about heart disease there, and yet you were able to write a book in that time. You wrote a book in that time called The Boy with Two Hearts. And in many ways, my friend, I suppose it saved your life. It gave you a reason. It changed your life in so many ways. Tell us about The Boy with Two Hearts.
So The Boy with Two Hearts is a legacy, a book of hope about my older brother who had a very rare congenital heart disease. And if we didn't come to UK, he wouldn't have lived. And I'm always grateful for NHS because they gave me additional 17 years with my older brother who passed away suddenly in 2018.
It's so interesting to hear about your book, The Boy with Two Hearts, and anyone who's read 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini will also be very aware of the kind of tragedy of lots of people fleeing the Taliban in Afghanistan. They went to America, very different tale, but I suppose it goes some way to sort of humanise the refugee story. And I just wonder what your perspective is on Suella Braverman, some of the language that she's been sacked for in recent days, and your thoughts about the Supreme Court hearing today.
I think for me, one of the things that I've constantly said about my story, about the book, is a story of family, love, hope, but also is a story that kind of gives you an insight of that journey. For me, a refugee wasn't a word that I chose. It was a word that was given to me. For me, if we didn't make that journey, my mum wouldn't have lived. My brother wouldn't have additional 17 years. So for me, just realize the people and the reasons behind those numbers when we're making those decisions.
And do you think that in some of the rhetoric that's been used, people forget there are human beings in all of this?
I believe so. And I think when people saw the play based on the book in National Theatre, that was the surprise outcome. People realised this is just a family, 3 boys, love football, messing around, and that was universal.
Okay. What about that play lives on? Where is it performing today?
As of today, it's actually playing Athens in Greece as we speak. And I hope that the story carries on. And as I said, just sheds a light on hope and love and family.
And what about you? Where are you at now? I can't see where we're speaking to you from. Where are you? And what happened to Hamid Amiri's life?
I'm in my room, Cardiff, which we've been ever since moving into UK. What happened to Hamid? That's a good question. I've never had someone ask me that. After really struggling with the language, with the culture, and failing my GCSEs and my A-levels, I managed to get my head down, get my degree, and have a full-time job in IT, but constantly go to places where I can inspire the next generation and give them hope. It doesn't matter where you've come from, what you believe in, you can always achieve and become successful, whatever success looks like for you. And that's my positive message, and making sure my brother's legacy lives on.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Very good hearing from you, Hamid. And we appreciate you telling us your story, and long may it continue to develop and grow. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder to say that you can keep up to date on that Rwanda Supreme Court ruling today. We have special coverage throughout the day on GB News, the People's Channel. And the good thing about the Supreme Court is they allow cameras in there. So we will have actual live footage from that judgment.
It's amazing listening to Hamid and him talking about struggling with the language and getting to grips with his GCSEs and whatever, because I was just thinking how well and how eloquently he speaks, and how...
Yeah, written a play now, hasn't he?
Yeah, and he does speak from the heart, you know. He's so peaceful to the way he talks. Now, a terribly disturbing story now we want to bring to you. This is broken overnight. 7 members of a Glaswegian paedophile gang have been found guilty of running what's been described as a monstrous child sex abuse ring.
Yes, the judge in the case described their offences as the depths of human depravity in what's believed to be the largest prosecution of a child abuse ring in Scottish history.
Joining us for the latest, former Met Detective Peter Blexley on this one. Just when you thought, Peter, or we would think that, you know, everybody's on top of these situations, it could never flourish on such a wide scale, we never cease to be disappointed.
No, I'm afraid we're not. And this case is so depraved, the details are so harrowing that some of the newspapers are putting warnings ahead of their articles so that readers can brace themselves or look away. These were primary school children who were plied with alcohol and cocaine and then subjected to the most horrific sexual offences, and they were in the grip of fear because these heroin-addicted paedophiles had convinced the children that they had magic powers, that they were witches and they were wizards, and they had wands and they used a Ouija board, all with the intent of terrifying these children into believing that they had powers that enabled them to fulfil their sick and depraved sexual fantasies.
Yeah, I've covered a horrendous child paedophile case myself, and I was really badly affected by a lot of the evidence that I had to see and hear in court. I was really interested in this case that the jurors were given counselling, or at least offered it by the judge, because what they had to sit through had been so horrendous, not least, of course, for the victims themselves, but for those involved in the trial as well.
Yes, absolutely right. And I praise the judge entirely for doing that. But whilst we're talking about people affected, we must, of course, mention these children, the victims. Now, the sentencing is handed down on the 4th of January, but the stark and harsh reality is that these children will carry the trauma of what happened to them for decades.
Forever.
Decades upon decades. Yeah. And of course, it is vitally important that they get the help they need so that they can recover, try and deal with the trauma, and hopefully, against hope, live fulfilling lives thereafter.
But Isabel has a point about the detectives involved in all of this. We talked about people who were giving evidence and jurors who were looking at evidence. But what about the detectives, the people who apply for a job in child protection? In the summer, I went to see police officers in Slough and the child protection unit there. And I honestly, Peter, I could not have done their job. I didn't witness, look at anything. I knew it was all there on the computer screens to see. The files were there. But you have to be affected by that as a serving officer.
Well, this is a question that cuts very close to home for me, because my wife, who is now retired from the Metropolitan Police, served 16 years on what was then called a child protection unit. So she's been to the post-mortems of babies. She's dealt with the worst of predatory sex offenders, and at the end of her career, she monitored those people in the community after they'd been released. So My wife would come home to me, would offload, but she developed her own coping mechanisms, which essentially was to grow a thick skin, but to work alongside a team of wonderful detectives with whom they could share their experiences, by and large, get it out, get it off their chests, so to speak, and then come home with very little baggage. Although if she did, I was always there with welcoming arms and a listening ear.
Well, good for you and good for her. Absolutely hero's work.
Thanks very much indeed, my friend. We'll leave it there as that story unfolds, and we'll hear more about that throughout the day here on GB News. Let's now go to the weather. Let's get the weather update. Alex Burkle with that.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Alex Burkle here with your latest GB News weather update. Ahead of some wet and windy weather arriving tomorrow, we have a bit of a north-south split in our forecast at the moment. That's because it's a cloudy picture across many northern areas with outbreaks of rain, some of these heavy in places. Further south, though, a drier, sunnier picture, particularly across southern England and Wales and also Northern Ireland. Watch out for a few showers across parts of Wales and southwest England, perhaps. Also, a decent amount of sunshine across the far north of Scotland today. Temperatures a little bit on the low side, ranging from 8 or 9 Celsius in the north to around 12 or 13 Celsius further south. As we go through this evening and overnight, we're going to see a bit more cloud and some further outbreaks of rain for a time across northern parts, but most of the rain clearing away. Some clearer skies towards the south, but then our attention turns to this swathe of wet and windy weather pushing its way up from the southwest. This will lift our temperatures, so a relatively mild start in the southwest, chillier further north and east, some frost likely across parts of Scotland. So a reversal in our fortunes as we go through Thursday. Across many northern parts, it's looking largely dry and there'll be some bright sunny weather around, but a wet and windy day ahead across more southern areas. The rain will be heavy at times, some gales likely, so we could see some disruption to travel and other impacts as well. Temperatures, well, they're going to be relatively academic because of the unsettled weather in the south and a little bit on the cool side further north.
Coming up, inflation has fallen to 4.6%. We'll be getting live analysis from Liam Halligan after this.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This morning, they announced the latest inflation figures fallen to 4.6%. This is good news. Liam Hannigan will tell you why.
It certainly is good news, Eamonn. Inflation fell from 6.7% during the year to September to just 4.6% during the year to October. So prices are still going up on average, but they're going up at the slowest rate now for 2 years. This is good news for Rishi Sunak, which people would notice if they weren't talking about Rwanda and...
well, don't worry, he'll be quick to claim it.
His outgoing Home Secretary. He said that inflation would be halved by the end of this year. He said that when inflation was 10.1%, so at 4.6%, that target has been met. Look,
but here's a question, right? So it all goes up every month, 10%, 9%, 8%, whatever. That's month on month.
No, that's the same month compared to the same month last year.
Yeah. OK, but it's still a lot of hike, percentage-wise. Does it ever come down? Is it likely to come down? Like, as in our costs? You know, so if it costs you, £6 for a fish supper and it's now 11 quid, is it likely to go back?
Funny you should say that, because food price inflation is the real problem here. Food price inflation, the headline number's 4.6%, all inflation. Food price inflation is still over 10%. So food prices in October were 10% more expensive on average than October 2022. The Office for National Statistics has said food prices were 30% higher in October than in October 2021. But fuel prices are coming down. Motor fuels 7.6% cheaper in October 2023 compared to October 2022.
Liam, that food inflation, that is horrendous.
It is horrendous.
30% higher than
3-0 on 2 years ago. 30% higher.
So my question to you is it ever likely to go down by 30%?
No, I don't think food prices will go down. I think the rate of increase will slow down. Fuel prices have come down, as I've said. Electricity prices are significantly lower. They're 16% lower last month than they were in October 2022. Gas prices 30% lower. That's why the overall figure has come down, even though food prices are still very, very high, more so than they were last year.
So you've got the government giving you licences out in the North Sea, right? We're not convinced that when we hear this, that this will directly impact on fuel costs in the UK. Does that make what they're doing redundant, or will it still be effective?
No, I don't think it's redundant. Look, there's lots of what we call geopolitical risk around. There's lots of concern that the UK might not be able to access energy supplies if the OPEC exporters cartel turns the screw, pushes up oil prices, if the Russians turn the screw and limit gas exports. It helps to have your own oil and gas at a time when there is geopolitical risk. And I do think that if we pump more of our oil and gas, that will generally mean prices are lower, though, of course, that oil and gas goes onto world markets. But it's better to have your own oil and gas than to not have it.
The Chancellor's smile, I doubt it, but let's see if he gets at least half a grin out of this one.
In January, the Prime Minister said that his #1 pledge was to halve inflation. People at the time said that was going to be easy to deliver, it would happen automatically. We now know that wasn't the case. We took some very difficult decisions to control borrowing and debt, and we have now delivered that pledge a whole month earlier. There's lots more work to do. We still have to bring inflation down to its target level of 2%. But now we are beginning to win the battle against inflation. We can move to the next part of our economic plan, which is the long-term growth of the British economy. And that's why next week will be an autumn statement for growth.
There you go. So it's his big moment next Wednesday, and this will set him on a good trajectory, I would argue, to sort of perhaps pull something out of the bag to appease those people looking for some goodies, maybe something that might promote
He's
growth.
under huge pressure from his own backbenchers, particularly on the Tory right, to deliver some kind of tax cuts. Taxation is at a 70-year high. A lot of Conservatives don't like the fact that that's happening under a Conservative government, and they will be looking for tax cuts.
OK. Liam Halligan, thanks very much.
Thanks, Liam. Time to go through the latest sports news, and for that we have Mr. Sport himself, Paul Coit.
Well, I tell you, Liam better watch out, because I've got some financial sports news for you here. So watch out, Mr. Halligan. I'll tell you what, Manchester City have broken the record for income by an English club. Annual revenues, £712.8 million.
See, I find that impossible.
It's staggering. You wait, profits.
I find it impossible to believe.
Profits of 80.4 million.
Where? How? Through the gate or in merchandise?
Everything.
I mean, I know they're incredibly successful on the pitch, but Liam, we would have to all admit they're not the best-known team in the world.
They're not even the best-known team in Manchester.
Exactly.
Oh, now, come on, boys. This is all very partisan.
But it's not. It's very true. I'm just finding, and of course, there's big question marks over financial irregularities.
We're still waiting for that.
It's just funny that this is now just maybe disappeared here.
Well,
I'm very impressed if they are.
Well, they pushed Manchester United into second when it comes to wage bill. How much do you reckon the wage bill is? So Manchester City wage bill.
They've got profits of 648.
Yep. So how much their wage bill? If you think of the players they're earning.
Paul, I really wouldn't know. I just know it's scandalous.
Liam, you fancy a pop at this? How much the wage bill of Manchester City?
The annual wage bill, I'd say 350 million quid.
422.9 million. So it's even more than Real Madrid. So and bonuses with the Champions League, it's going to be even more than that. Even more than that. It's a lot of money. Sin bins. Should we do a bit on sin bins?
Yeah.
So lawmakers are considering this. We like it very much. I think everybody likes it. The fact that sin bins could be introduced. IFAB, who are the lawmakers, they meet in a couple of weeks to decide the rules of the game. So when it comes with VAR, various other things, they're the ones that have decided. So they're thinking that with dissent, those sorts of things which are going on, and referees are not being treated well by players, although this has been going on forever. They're thinking 10-minute sin bins for players. So only captains will be allowed to approach referees, and that if anybody breaks that, then they can be sent to a sin bin. It's like rugby. It's just a bit of respect for referees.
We were sitting talking about this. I don't think anybody would overly object to this, would you?
I personally think it'd be great to see respect brought into the game of football.
It's only players. It's only certain players will probably think it's unfair, and probably managers, but I think it's a very good idea.
Do you know, and respect is the most popular word used by players.
Well, exactly.
Give me some respect, man. Yeah, for my skills and my talent and, the person that I am.
Well, do you know what? Being a referee is a very skilled job. And so they deserve respect.
Absolutely.
It's not as unsportsmanlike.
Respect is a two-way street. It doesn't just go in one direction. So a little respect to the referees.
Call me old-fashioned.
Oh no, I won't. I think we're all with you.
Can you put VAR in the sin bin? A lot of fans want to put VAR in the sin bin.
I know it's been vindicated. Yeah, I mean we're pretty happy about what happened with the Arsenal situation, because it was vindicated yesterday that all the right decisions were made. And also Mikel Arteta. Now should we do the lookalikes here?
Love this, right?
We'll do the lookalikes.
So Arteta complains about Newcastle scoring against Arsenal, right?
Yep.
And as I pointed out, has Mikel Arteta and Captain Black from Captain Scarlet ever been seen in the same room?
Well, let's have a look. We do have proof here. Captain, look at that. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's incredible.
That's unreal.
Captain Black looks like Mikel Arteta if he was dead, I think. It just looks a little pale. But look at it. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
It is unbelievable.
I used to get really scared Captain Scarlet when his eyes sort of changed. It used to give me the heebie-jeebies when I was about 5.
Really? I had that with Hector's house, but that was another story altogether.
You think you're watching Thunderbirds, but it's kind of a video nasty version of Thunderbirds.
It is. Oh, yeah.
Virgil and Scott and yes, my lady.
But it's funny, I feel that way when I see Mikel Arteta. I do. Let's have a look at the second one. This is another sporting lookalike. Now, this is Enzo Ferrari, the man who founded Ferrari. This is quite a well-known one. Enzo Ferrari, along with, we're talking about Arsenal, another Arsenal player, which hopefully we're going to see, Mesut Ozil. I mean, look at that.
Must you see a man?
Nearly 100 years apart, those pictures. Enzo Ferrari there when he was a racing driver, and Mesut Ozil. It's
There's a lot of face cream going on there, I'd say.
And see, there's no blood relation between them.
None at all.
If people are listening on the radio, this is really worth checking out, watching it back on our app or on our website, because these lookalikes are uncanny.
And I've got one more for you. We talked about Elvis in Viva Las Vegas.
Oh, you're not going to show Elvis and me, are you?
No, of course not. Why do you look like Elvis? Well, I thought that was George Clooney was
when
yours.
He died.
There we are. There's Elvis there with Anne Margaret in Viva Las Vegas. And let's have a look at his sporting lookalike, see if you can guess who this is. Oh, it is you! Oh, there he is! There he is!
But that's not me, that's Elvis. Look at those two beautiful women on either side there.
Yeah.
Two of my best friends and buddies there in life, just draped around me there.
Elvis meets Roy Orbison. I'm not really, but there we are.
Where were you that night?
That, thankfully, was about 2 months before I got the job replacing Charlotte Hawkins alongside you, and I'm so glad I didn't have to stand up and do that dance.
Did you not?
The Sky Girls had to do a dance.
Did you think twice when you saw him as Elvis and think, maybe
I have seen him as Elvis many a time, and every time I think I'm with the original.
The king has resurrected.
The king of rock and roll and the king of broadcast.
Paul.
Well, I try my best, you know. I do what I can,
Captain Black thing.
Yeah, well, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
That warrants a sort of investigation, a paranormal investigation.
You know what? I will look deeper.
What if Arteta is a Mr. On?
Well, I think he'll have to be killed, surely, by Captain Scarlet.
Well, Black was the Mr. On's representative on Earth.
That's correct, yeah.
Right, so he was killed in a mission to Mars.
Right.
Yeah, and then he came back as the Mr. Ons. You see, the Earthlings tried to blow up the Mr. Ons settlement in Mars.
Right.
So originally the Mr. Ons were good people.
Yes.
They became bad people.
Of course they did,
represented by Captain Black.
Well, I told you, when we used to play Captain Scarlet at school, I was given the role by my mates as Captain Ochre, who was in one episode for 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's a brown
still upsets me. Captain, who the hell's Captain Ochre?
Captain Ochre. And then there was Captain Green.
Yeah.
Colonel White.
Yes.
Starbase. And then the Angels.
That's like Cluedo.
It does.
Slightly more confusing than Cluedo, I think you'll find, though, Liam. Slightly
the
more.
Angels were good. Rhapsody Angel, Harmony Angel.
You know what? I remember the Interceptors, but the rest of it, you've gone...
Beautiful piece. Well, I actually think you've put me in the mood to go to a toy shop now.
OK, let's go. We'll go do that.
Thank you. Isabel, the question of the day is...
Can anyone guess what Cambridge's 2023 word of the year is?
Yes, it's... Oh, no, can't say that. Find out after this.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
We say hello again to Christopher Biggins and Candice Holsworth, and they've got the stories that are making the headlines this morning. Candice, let's start with the situation of the Israeli hostages and your take on that.
Yes, so this is a story that's come out, originally reported in the Washington Post, but then also covered by the Times of Israel, that Hamas and Israeli officials could be nearing a deal to release about 70 women and children currently being held in Gaza in exchange for some Palestinian women and minors that are being held in Israeli prisons. Right now, we don't know. This is all anonymous sources quoting this. But if they do so, it may take place during a 5-day ceasefire. Benjamin Netanyahu gave an interview this weekend to Meet the Press, CNN. Yeah. He said they are making progress, but he didn't want to give any more details. I mean, this would be huge if that could happen. I mean, it still doesn't cover...
I believe one of the hostages gave birth yesterday.
I've heard this.
Just imagine giving birth in those sorts of circumstances. It's, what, 6 weeks that they've been hostages now?
Absolutely. And what they're doing and what they've done to children already, I mean, it just doesn't bear thinking about.
Yeah, there's a certain irony to all of that as well. Christopher, fed-up locals who live in a village made famous by the Holiday and Bridget Jones are now planning to charge tourists to park and use public toilets. Now, this is Sheen, isn't it?
Sheer.
Sorry,
yeah.
Which I passed through and have been to. It's got quite a nice pub for lunch and things there.
Got a couple, yeah.
It's very nice.
You think they'd be thrilled, wouldn't you?
It's a very, very small village with a very windy road into it.
It's tight.
Yeah, I think they
really
can do without it.
Really tight. And I'm surprised. So they're saying that the locals are charging people, or the council is charging people. I'm just interested.
The tourists are going to have to pay to park there and to use the public toilets.
But I'm sort of thinking, and the problem is what? It's become like a tourist attraction,
yes.
You know, like a theme park in many ways, and it's not a theme park, but. It's very hard to get parking.
It's also really misleading because the film The Holiday, which I've watched probably more than any other film in the history of films...
It's a wonderful film.
...has this beautiful cottage, which is like in Cotswold Stone, which is not anywhere near the village of Sheer. So the only part of Sheer is you walk past the church to the pub. And to be honest, you know, there's plenty of those up and down the country that look very, very similar. And, you know, much as the pub's lovely, it's not exceptional. It's not anything different. The same church featured in Bridget Jones, I think. Was it Bridget Jones' Diary or Bridget Jones? One of the Bridget Jones movies used the same backdrop for the wedding. But look, I love Shea, I love Surrey, but, you know...
Well, this happens, though, all over the country. I mean, you know, anywhere with a TV series... I mean, you know...
which is a good thing.
I think it's a good thing, too.
Yeah.
I mean, Cornwall, when we did Poldark down in Cornwall, I mean, it was fantastic for the tourist trade. Everybody went down there because it's a beautiful county. And it's just wonderful. In fact, talking of churches, we filmed at a church which some people were walking along the beach and they tripped on something. They went back and looked, and it was the top of a steeple. And they brushed it away over the years, and there was a church.
Oh,
and we filmed in this church, perfectly formed. And it had just been covered in sand over the years.
How strange.
I know.
Wow.
It was bizarre. It was beautiful. But I think, you know, I think it's a rather wonderful thing to, you know, to take a TV
these things
series.
often don't last forever. They, you know, they will last a while, and then the world moves on to a different TV series or a different film, and then people forget these things are there. So it's interesting. I can see why it's a problem for people and a
I'm of the
nightmare.
camp that I would hate it. If it was my local village, I'd be like, oh, get out the way, stop taking a picture for Instagram.
Locals don't like it. It doesn't matter where it is. Like, people in the Lake District really hate the tourists coming in.
Same in Cornwall.
People in the Lake District hate the tourists. That's a good slogan, isn't it? Welcome to the Lake District. We hate you.
Go away.
Where did they film the Hovis commercial? Because that became very popular,
I don't know where
didn't
it is. Yeah. A matter of fact, that should be on my bucket list. I'd like to go and see that.
Yeah, I would
You're
like to
one
go
of those
and see it.
people.
I'm one of those people, yeah. And I mean, when you went, I mean, I was very, very lucky in the USA to go to the desert in America and go and see where a lot of westerns were made.
And they've got space out there for all these tourists.
Yeah. I'm not. That's the same problem. I mean, the Navajo Indians had a problem with it, whatever. But it was an amazing thing to see, you know, Fort Apache, or She Wore Yellow Ribbon, or whatever where all these were. I personally loved it. I loved it. Now, Candice, Cambridge Dictionary, it's got a word of the year, right? And the word for this year is...
Hallucinate.
And why?
Because, so this article says that it's the rise of artificial intelligence producing hallucinogenic images, so images that aren't real or are false, even if it's written text, which sort of has the ring of truth about it, but which has lots of misleading information. And this is the sort of age we're entering into now, where we've got all these fake images, fake articles, things that seem real but aren't quite real. It's actually quite sinister.
So maybe we're all hallucinating.
Yes.
What's real and what's not real.
You see, can I just tell you, sheer is real, and you would have it banned off people's lists to make it unreal. You're not welcome here.
Yeah,
but
basically.
There you are.
Tourists not welcome in here.
We should give them all LSD and they can all hallucinate.
Just to say, we do not advocate. OK, let's talk about 007, Christopher. There is a new Royal Mint coin range celebrating James Bond.
Well, I think it's rather wonderful. I mean, so there's going to be a whole new range of coins with 007, and there's going to be... Each design will feature a scene from a different decade of the super spy created by author Ian Fleming.
Feels like every week the Royal Mint brings out another coin. Last week it was for the King's 75th birthday.
Yes.
I do wonder if that's all we really use the Royal Mint for now. If money is
to make money,
just commemorative collector's items. Rather than actually using a coin.
Well, I think it's quite nice, though, too.
No, I'm not saying it's not nice, but it just seems to be the way the world's going.
Yeah, you're not going to go and spend it in the post office, are you? You know,
well, you can't find a post office.
Can't find a post office. But so this seems to be... When I was young, you used to be able to get these... coins that were given out by Esso, Petrol or Shell, or whatever it is, and used to have these charts that you would put the coins into. Obviously, not real coins, but...
they were very lightweight, too, weren't they?
Very lightweight they were, Christopher. You're absolutely right there. But I think it's an interesting thing.
I think collecting is good. Don't you think, collections of things?
Well, it depends.
I mean, your collection is huge, isn't it?
I could have been, as a 10-year-old, talked into this. I never understand people who collect stamps, for instance, but then
I collect stamps as a child.
Yeah, but I did it as a child. I did as a child, you know, and I wonder, does anybody still do that anymore?
Yeah, penny farthing.
I used to love collecting coins from all over the world, but now that everything's going digital, is that something that's going to be lost now?
Yes, these things won't exist anymore. So what do you collect, guys? Let me
Or do you not collect anything? Because we have talked about, and someone has vindicated me in this, that this is quite a male thing, collecting stuff.
You're probably right.
Memorabilia, I don't get it. Like,
I
you
like
collect nothing.
Toys,
nothing.
Football memorabilia.
Yeah, weird.
That I would collect. Comics.
No.
Certain other, football programmes and things like that.
See, I'd spend my spare cash on beauty products or cushions.
Cushions.
Yeah,
really
candles,
nice. How lovely.
Things that drive my husband up the wall.
Yeah.
Do you need any more cushions?
Well,
do you need another moisturiser? Yes,
It takes me 15 minutes to get to bed at night by the time I take the cushions.
Yeah, my husband says the same thing.
What the heck they're there for, I'm not really sure.
I've been collecting paintings over the years.
That's it.
And I
like
do
that.
like it. I mean, Eamonn took me to Belfast.
I did.
Took me, one of his favourite artists, and I bought a fantastic painting, which I still have to this day.
If you want to buy any, I've got a few that I could sell to you now.
Right, I'll be on to you.
I just do it. Well, anyway, that's another story.
See, I thought you were going to say you spend 15 minutes at bedtime using all your beauty products, and it's not just a female thing. Because apparently Christine Lampard has let it slip that Frank likes to use some of her toiletries. Tell us more, Biggins.
Well, he is very handsome, of course, Frank. I mean, he's a gorgeous young man, and apparently he's found that some of her face creams are quite good for him. So I think and Christine is so gorgeous anyway. I mean, she's just fabulously, just a natural beauty. But anyway, he's using some of those, and they've mocked up a picture here in the Daily Star, which is quite funny, with him with a towel around his head and the thing, which I'm sure he never looks like, or he's never been seen in it. But anyway, it's quite interesting. A face mask.
Have either of you chaps ever worn a face mask?
No.
Like the sort of, what do you call them, mud or
clay?
No.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I don't lie, I went to a health farm once, and I did get that sort of face
I can
mask.
see you with cucumbers on your eyes.
Yeah, you're right. I've forgotten that. Yes.
But Eamonn?
Yeah, with makeup.
Of course,
doing this makeup here all the time, your skin dries out.
Aren't you? Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Eamonn, did you see that Elvis was in the room earlier, in the studio?
No, that was me.
No.
That was me.
Oh, no, don't be silly.
Honestly, mate, that was me.
No, it wasn't, surely.
Yeah.
No, that's uncanny.
That was me, so all fine. Right, so where are we? What else have we got here? Charities have called for an end to potentially hundreds of thousands of migrant parents being denied access to crucial child free because they're categorised. Oh, this sounds very boring, but anyway, what is this, Candice? Tell me this.
You want the childcare one? So a whole load of charities which look after migrant rights have said that if your status is as a migrant and you don't have permanent settled status in the UK, you can't access childcare services, so the free early childcare stuff.
Yes.
And they're saying that this is a big disparity because it means...
Well, it may well be, but I can understand why people are objecting to that.
I know, that's the thing. I mean, it's difficult because to get the free childcare services, I mean, everyone's entitled to it, but when you move up a notch...
Unless you're a migrant.
It has to be through tax. And so people, I guess, wonder, have you contributed enough tax, that kind of thing. Although they say if you don't have childcare, you can't really contribute to the economy in the same way and you can't earn money. So it's sort of a double bind.
Yeah. It is, and it's part of the never-ending conundrum about letting migrants into the country, making them of use.
I know.
Letting them work for a living and whatever. So we're not going to solve that now. But anyway, Candice, lovely talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. And Biggins, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Will we leave your services soon for Panto?
Yes. I go away in 3 weeks' time.
Last year we did a live with you in a swing chandelier type get-up. I hope we do the same this year.
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
We'll leave this thought in people's minds as we cross to the weather.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather update. Ahead of some wet and windy weather arriving tomorrow, we have a bit of a north-south split in our forecast at the moment. That's because it's a cloudy picture across many northern areas with outbreaks of rain, some of these heavy in places. Further south, though, a drier, sunnier picture, particularly across southern England and Wales and also Northern Ireland. Watch out for a few showers across parts of Wales and southwest England, perhaps. Also, a decent amount of sunshine across the far north of Scotland today. Temperatures a little bit on the low side, ranging from 8 or 9 Celsius in the north to around 12 or 13 Celsius further south. As we go through this evening and overnight, we're going to see a bit more cloud and some further outbreaks of rain for a time across northern parts, but most of the rain clearing away. Some clearer skies towards the south, but then our attention turns to this swathe of wet and windy weather pushing its way up from the southwest. This will lift our temperatures, so a relatively mild start in the southwest, chillier further north and east, some frost likely across parts of Scotland. So a reversal in our fortunes as we go through Thursday. Across many northern parts, it's looking largely dry and there'll be some bright sunny weather around, but a wet and windy day ahead across more southern areas. The rain will be heavy at times, some gales likely, so we could see some disruption to travel and other impacts as well. Temperatures, well, they're going to be relatively academic because of the unsettled weather in the south and a little bit on the cool side further north.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning to you. It's about to turn 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 15th of November. You're tuned in to Breakfast with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Thank you for your company. We'll bring you through to 9:30 this morning, and a lot happening between now and then. How do you solve a problem like Suella Braverman? That is the question.
Well, it's a crisis for the Prime Minister, as his former Home Secretaries accused him of political weakness and backtracking on their secret deal.
Well, this comes as a final judgment. We're expecting it any moment now. It's imminent from the Supreme Court on the government's Rwanda deportation plan. Mark White there for us with the very latest. Mark.
Well, it's 19 months since Boris Johnson first announced that Rwanda plan, and finally it is crunch day. But if that ruling goes against the government, according to the Home Secretary Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary I should say, there is no plan B.
In other news this morning, 7 members of a Glasgow paedophile gang have been found guilty of running a so-called monstrous child sex abuse ring. It's believed to be the largest prosecution of a child abuse ring in Scottish history.
Good news on inflation. It's fallen to 4.6%. Our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with the rundown. Liam.
Good news indeed, Eamonn. Inflation down from 6.7 to 4.6% in October. Is this the beginning of the end of the cost of living crisis? It seems the next move in interest rates, when it comes, will be down.
And is there another storm on the way? Alex Burkle will tell you.
Good morning. It's a cloudy and wet day across northern parts, drier and brighter in the south, before some wet and windy weather arrives tomorrow. I'll have more shortly.
And as regards what you have to say, well, all I see is, Isabella, praise for Suella Braverman, admiration for her from Eileen, from Elaine. Ross says, oh, here's one. He says, I don't support Suella's comments. They're ridiculous. And Debbie says, good morning. I do hope the flights to Rwanda are allowed to go ahead.
Jonathan says, all this infighting, they're not concentrating on the day-to-day cost of living with people heading into winter. Keep thoughts coming in.
GBviews at gbnews.com or tweet at gbnews.
So it's the morning after an unprecedented backlash from the scorned former Home Secretary, timed to create maximum embarrassment for the Prime Minister.
This comes as a ruling on his immigration policy is expected from the Supreme Court any moment now.
Well, in the attack, Suella Braverman said that the Prime Minister had failed to deliver on what she called every single policy, and she spoke of their mysterious deal before labelling him weak.
Let's get some thoughts from our Home Affairs editor, Mark White. Mark, good morning.
Good morning to you. Yes, at 9:45 this morning, Eamonn, when we're expected to hear from the Supreme Court. Now, the President of the Supreme Court, Lord Reid, will give 3 judgments. So the first 2 judgments, issues that are not related to Rwanda. Then we will get that Rwanda judgment, which is due, I think, just after 10 o'clock this morning. And of course, the government clearly eagerly awaiting that decision. It's 19 months since Boris Johnson down at Lyd Airport in Kent first announced that the government planned to send those crossing the English Channel illegally in small boats to Rwanda for processing of their asylum claims. But the first flight never got off the ground. That was due to leave in 2022, in June of 2022, and it never did. There was only 7 people on the flight in the end, but even they had lawyers acting on their behalf, and that flight just never left, and it's been mired in these constant court battles ever since. Well, now we're at the end of that process, and we'll await to see what the Supreme Court say. There is a main issue, I think, that they are considering, their lordships, in terms of the Rwanda deal, and that's whether really Rwanda's asylum processing system is robust enough, and whether there's a danger that those who are applying for asylum in Rwanda could be turned down. That particular application for refugee status is turned down because those plans are not robust enough, and then these people end up being sent back to their home country, which might not be a safe location to send them to. That's certainly a main plank of the arguments that the lawyers representing some of those asylum seekers were putting to the Supreme Court. The government says, from its point of view, that they have carried out due diligence. They have been given assurances by the Rwandan government, and indeed the Rwandan government has been very transparent. It is willing to have people there on the ground throughout this process to ensure that the asylum applications are dealt with properly and robustly, to ensure if there are any issues that they're flagged up and dealt with. So that might be enough for the Supreme Court to deem this particular plan legal. Clearly, if it doesn't, and they are deemed to be unlawful, the Rwanda plans, then it's back to the drawing board for the government, because Suella Braverman, in her letter there, you saw it or heard extracts from it to Rishi Sunak, she said there is no plan B here.
Mark, about the Supreme Court, of course, is that cameras are allowed in there. We will be able to see the ruling being handed down today. How optimistic are you? I mean, given, as you've pointed out, that there wasn't a unanimous decision at the Court of Appeal, and do you necessarily buy Suella's suggestion that there isn't a plan B? I mean, we're hearing that the Home Office have drawn up a watered-down alternative, but are still very much wedded to the concept of Rwanda.
Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of Plan B, clearly they've got to have something to fall back on if this is deemed to be unlawful. I think what the government has said consistently throughout is Rwanda is not the silver bullet, that it's everything taken in the round that will help break the model of the people traffickers across in France. So it's, you know, a tougher approach to it. It deals also with the likes of Albania to return people from Albania that try and cross here as well. So a number of different planks of the Rwandan legislation under the illegal migration bill, which the government hopes will help break that model. But key to that is the Rwandan deal. They need that to go through. Really, it is for them their main shining sort of policy here in terms of dealing with illegal migration.
Mark, thanks very much indeed. We're just looking at Patrick Christie when you join him today. He's run a poll out there. Some interesting reading, some of the things that he's discovered from you. He's saying a majority of all voters, 51%, approve of the sacking of Suella Braverman, but only a minority of Conservative voters in the last general election support the decision. And so more voters back Rwanda than oppose it. 40% support the Rwanda deal, 32% oppose, 71% of Conservatives support the whole idea. Nothing too decisive there, I have to say. But yeah, we'll give you more of that towards the end of the programme.
And just a reminder, we are bringing you full coverage of that Supreme Court ruling live here on GB News.
Inflation has fallen quite dramatically to 4.6% for the month of October.
Yes, it follows 2 months of inflation staying pretty much at 6.7%. And the Chancellor, as you might not be surprised to hear, is very pleased about it all this morning.
In January, the Prime Minister said that his #1 pledge was to halve inflation. People at the time said that was going to be easy to deliver, it would happen automatically. We now know that wasn't the case. We took some very difficult decisions to control borrowing and debt, and we have now delivered that pledge a whole month earlier. There's lots more work to do. We still have to bring inflation down to its target level of 2%, but now we are beginning to win the battle against inflation. We can move to the next part of our economic plan, which is the long-term growth of the British economy, and that's why next week will be an autumn statement for growth.
He looks as if he can't believe it, Liam Halligan, so he doesn't. But if he's happy, he has to let his face know it. Is he happy?
I think the Chancellor and the Prime Minister will be happy because inflation's gone below 5%. It's at a 2-year low. They've met their pledge to halve inflation by the end of the year. They made that pledge when inflation was 10.1% in January. But look, inflation's still really high. 4.6% is more than double the 2% target, which is where it should be. Food price inflation, hang on to your hats, it's still above 10%. The ONS, the Office for National Statistics, said in its numbers this morning that food prices in October were 30% higher than October 2021. 2021, a 30% rise over 2 years. So why has inflation come down? Certainly not because of food prices. Food prices inflation is still very, very high. It's come down, Eamonn and Isabel, because petrol and diesel prices have come down compared to October last year, and above all, electricity prices have come down. They are 15% down on October last year, and household gas prices are 30% down on October last year.
With those reductions in energy bills and all the rest of it, fuel prices, is it too much to hope that food inflation might follow suit? There might be a bit of a time lag before that can be passed on.
There is a time lag in food price inflation. Why? Because to grow food, you need fuel, you need fertiliser, you need finance, the 3 Fs of farming. And all those things were really expensive this time last year. And, of course, there's a lag because you've got to grow the food. So in the food that we currently buy now are higher fuel prices, higher fertiliser prices, higher cost of finance for those farmers when they plant. So it will take food prices a bit of time to come down. Having said that, it's also worth saying that inflation in the UK, while sharply down, 6.7 to 4.6, it's still high by international standards. In the Eurozone, inflation is below 3%. In the US, number came out yesterday, it's 3.2%. We're 4.6%. So it's still pretty toppy in this country.
So to have people remotely feel the way they weren't aware they were feeling back in 2019, but, you know, so you're talking about food inflation, 30% more expensive in that time since then. What would you have to have been taking home in terms of a salary increase percentage-wise or whatever to make you comparable to 2019? How worse off are we, roughly?
Well, people spend roughly 1/5 of their household budget on food. So if food is 30% more expensive, that's a pretty chunky increase in your costs. And, you know, electricity prices have come down from October last year, but they're still high by historic standards. Energy and food in this country are still a lot more expensive than many other countries. And that's why, you know, the cost of living is high and why our standard of living is actually relatively low for other large industrialised countries.
So we're not better off, and we're not going to be better off for quite some time.
I think that's true. I don't think the British economy has properly recovered from the 2008 financial crisis. We've grown on average by just over 1% since then. And in our lifetimes, we've generally grown by 2.5%, maybe 3%. So we're still suffering from the global financial crisis of 2008. Astonishing thing to say, but it's true. And we're particularly suffering in this country from lockdown, because we locked down very, very hard compared to other West European countries. We have fully recovered GDP from lockdown, but still prices are high, supply chain issues are still there. I'm afraid, look, if you shutter the economy completely, as we did, a very drastic decision, it takes a long time for it to recover. We're still feeling the implications of that. But in total, this is good news. It's good that inflation's finally below 5%, heading down, probably now no more interest rate rises.
And one of the PM's 5 pledges. I'm sure he'll be pleased to strike that off.
That had nothing to do with him.
Nothing to do with him, but still one of his pledges. Liam, thanks very much indeed.
7 members of a Glaswegian paedophile gang have been found guilty of running what's been described as a monstrous child sex abuse ring.
Well, the judge described their offences as the depths of human depravity in what's believed to be the largest prosecution of a child abuse ring in Scottish history.
We've spoken this morning to former Metropolitan Police Detective Peter Blexley. This is what he had to say.
Is so depraved, the details are so harrowing that some of the newspapers are putting warnings ahead of their articles so that readers can brace themselves or look away. These were primary school children who were plied with alcohol and cocaine and then subjected to the most horrific sexual offences, and they were in the grip of fear because these heroin-addicted paedophiles had convinced the children that they had magic powers, that they were witches and they were wizards, and they had wands and they used a Ouija board, all with the intent of terrifying these children into believing that they had powers that enabled them to fulfil their sick and depraved sexual fantasies.
Yeah, I've covered a horrendous child paedophile case myself, and I was really badly affected by a lot of the evidence that I had to see and hear in court. I was really interested in this case that the jurors were given counselling, or at least offered it by the judge, because what they had to sit through had been so horrendous, not least, of course, for the victims themselves, but for those involved in the trial as well.
Yes, absolutely right, and I praise the judge entirely for doing that. But whilst we're talking about people affected, we must, of course, mention these children, the victims. Now, the sentencing is handed down on the 4th of January, but the stark and harsh reality is that these children will carry the trauma of what happened to them for decades.
Forever.
Decades upon decades. Yeah. And of course, it is vitally important that they get the help they need so that they can recover, try and deal with the trauma, and hopefully, against hope, live fulfilling lives thereafter.
But you have to be affected by that as a serving officer.
Well, this is a question that cuts very close to home for me, because my wife, who is now retired from the Metropolitan Police, served 16 years on what was then called a child protection unit. So she's been to the post-mortems of babies. She's dealt with the worst of predatory sex offenders, and at the end of her career, she monitored those people in the community after they'd been released.
We hope you'll hear more about that story throughout the day on the station. Absolutely repulsive, absolutely ghastly. The fact that these adults drugged these children, made out that they were part of a fantastical world, a Harry Potter type world, and abused them the way they did. Absolutely depravity beyond belief.
Coming up, Britain's newsroom, Andrew Pearce is here to tell us about it. And actually, Andrew, you were just saying there about their sentences in the new year.
It's revolting, and there's no sentence long enough for these people. They're sick and they should never be allowed out, because I don't think they can be cured. I don't think they want to be cured.
Right, what have you got? I mean, silly question, really. You've got the ruling in your time.
Just around 10 o'clock, we'll get the verdict from the Supreme Court. I keep being told it may not be as straightforward as it seems. It could be caveated, it could be qualified, but this is a game changer for Rishi Sunak if he wins, and it's a big problem for him if he doesn't. And let's hope he does win, because we want to try and get to grips with what's happening across the Channel. All against the backdrops of...
He will have that under control, and then he'll have inflation under control. Two things in one day.
Well, the inflation figures are much better than expected, 4.6%, so he's virtually reached his target of halving inflation by the end of the year. But of course, against the backdrop of Rwanda, we have the Home Secretary's poisonous letter, former Home Secretary's poisonous letter. Now, look, I've covered cabinet resignations for 25, 30 years. I do not recall a resignation letter so bitter, so angry and so punchy. And will she intervene in the Commons today? She can. She'd be called immediately, because there's going to be an emergency statement on Rwanda. And she's already said in her letter, even if they win today in the Supreme Court, Rishi Sunak's hobbled it because he watered down the law.
What if she's right?
She may well be.
Yeah, she may well be. That's the thing. I know.
And this, look, we cannot underestimate. She's on manoeuvres for a leadership campaign. It looks like the Tories are going to lose the next election. There's a poll for GBNews today showing the Tories are 30 points behind. 30.
But don't you think in some ways this plays to those who call the Tories the nasty party? Yeah. You know, obviously Rishi Sunak wanted someone like Cameron to come in and try and be a bit, calmer about things. This is right back on all the front pages this morning. You know, what we were talking about with Nigel Farage, he's in the jungle, obviously. What he's been so successful at is putting the right-wing argument, but in a sort of charming way.
Yeah.
And she does it in the total opposite way.
And there's a lot of Tory MPs say, while we agree with her on the content of what she says, it's the way she says it, it's the way she keeps saying it, and it's the way she will never pipe down.
OK.
And
we have to pipe you down, my friend. We'll hit the break and we'll be back right after this. Don't go away.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Just going to give you the results of a GB News poll, which you'll hear more of with Patrick Christie today. 1,581 people were asked, do you support the government's proposal to send asylum seekers and illegal migrants to Rwanda?
And 40% of voters support the government's plan, 32% oppose, and 28% don't know.
And here's what some of you have been telling us this morning about what you think of the whole government policy on immigration, which you'll hear from the Supreme Court as to what they think come 10 o'clock.
The Rwanda policy is Sunak's only trump card, and it wasn't his idea in the first place. If the Supreme Courts find in favour of the government's Rwanda policy today, their next move will be to take it to the ECHR, which will take even more months. If the Supreme Court finds against the government, then Rishi Sunak is toast already at PMQs today.
I don't believe Rwanda provides a good solution, as it will not act as an immediate deterrent because of the significant backlog that still needs to be processed by the Home Office. The plan will also be very expensive and put a significant ongoing burden on the taxpayer, costing hundreds of millions of pounds. And once in Rwanda, if the claim is unsuccessful, I foresee problems with removal because of uncertainty over the person's nationality, and this will only put even more cost pressures on the taxpayer.
Live coverage with Mark White from the Supreme Court from 9:30 this morning with Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev.
And that's it from Breakfast. We'll be back at 6 tomorrow.
Have a good day.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Alex Burkle here with your latest GB News weather update. Ahead of some wet and windy weather arriving tomorrow, we have a bit of a north-south split in our forecast at the moment. That's because it's a cloudy